Anyway, that's what I got. That's who Pepe Silvia is. It's Clive's twin.
Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest thing that has ever happened on this stream. As a heads up, this podcast was recorded literally a day before the wave of Naoki Yoshida interviews. As a result, there is some stuff we may already have official answers to. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. Hello everyone, I'm the Night Sky Prince, and I am joined by one of my favorite guests. I love this guy. I've adored him when I watched all of his videos leading up to Final Fantasy XV's release. This man's an incredible content creator, one of my favorites. So glad to have you on here. Frustrated Jacob, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, man. As I talked about a bit when I was on last time, way back in the day, I did a lot of coverage of Final Fantasy XV after the 2013 re-unveiling. Talked about that game a lot because I saw at the time a lot of confusion in comment sections and on forums about what it was, what it wasn't, because I was the type of nerd who still had all of the press about Versus 13 in my mind. And it even anticipated, I think they're going to re-announce it and it might be 15 here. So I was kind of I felt that I had the continuity to be able to leap in and kind of say, hey guys, this is what's going on. This is what we know. Turns out a lot of that information had nothing to do with the game that we eventually got. But, for a little while there, I tricked myself into thinking that it was, and I tricked other people into thinking that it was valuable. But I covered that a good ways, kind of up until after the demos, because personally, we talked about this a little bit last time as well. I don't like, personally I don't find doing the minute-to-minute news coverage as fulfilling anymore. So once we got multiple demos for Final Fantasy 15 and tons of trailers, I kind of eased off on that. And I've been so busy with other stuff in my life lately that I don't get to do a lot of general news coverage on my YouTube channel anymore, though I am working on something for the just all the general Summer Jeff Fest season. Tis the season for games news. I am working on just kind of an overview thing about all that, along with some other stuff, because my channel's been a little slow for a while, but I got some stuff. I'm coming back, as they say, a little bit. Not to get too far ahead of myself, but yeah, and. So I like Final Fantasy. I talk about it fairly often. We talked about Kingdom Hearts a lot last time because it was right after the 20th anniversary stream and whatnot. But today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 stuff in general because that's what we got.
Yeah,
that's what we're going to talk about. Because you sent me an email and you were like, "Hey, here's the things we're going to talk about," and I was like, "We're not talking about Dragon's Dogma 2?" Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right, I guess I can just go. I can go watch these trailers and catch up, and then I'm sure I can BS my way through this for an hour or two.
Oh man, I'm surprised I didn't get a trailer. I think all we got was a logo.
It's just in development. I think it's because it's I think it was one of those when they said it's now in development, they meant right now.
Right.
We literally just now started.
Yeah, and I do kind of hate those announcements, but I think it's cool because a lot of people have been really anticipating a sequel to that. I actually bought the first game. I haven't played it yet, but I'm doing a little bit of research for Final Fantasy 16. So I'm going to be playing that. I'm going to be playing that pretty soon on here.
I don't know. I mean, who knows? I've been talking. My friend Joey's a big Dragon's Dogma head. He's very happy that they finally stopped teasing us and gave us an actual game. So I don't know. Maybe he and I will talk about maybe looking at that game sometime on our Let's Play channel because we do playthroughs of stuff as well, in addition to me making other videos. But that discussion has yet to be had because for the most part, every time I've called him recently, he's just been weeping tears of joy about the announcement of Dragon's Dogma 2. So I can't get a word out of him. So I'll have to get back to him on that later.
Right. And I wonder how it will turn out now with Ryota Suzuki working on this instead. But it seems like Capcom has so many great battle designers that they could spare
my brother Joshua and I have been talking about Capcom is kicking so much ass right now after the big video game industry heroes in the earlier days in the aughts. It's no, not so great. And then after Resident Evil 4, they kind of fell off, and now they're just banger after banger after banger again.
Right.
It's pretty exciting for them.
Yeah, Capcom kind of had both Square and Capcom had this dark age.
At the same time.
Yeah, at around the same time. And I think that both of them are really seeing a resurgence. But Capcom is like seeing probably the biggest one, because I don't think Capcom has like really missed in like a ultra bad way in quite a while. Not with like one of their major IPs, at least that I know of.
It's been a minute. No, they're doing quite well for themselves right now. Maybe Dragon's Dogma 2 will break the streak.
Yeah, and they seem to be the only ones. I hope not. I hope not, because they do seem to be the only ones with like these like top tier like combat designers nowadays, because Square keeps poaching these guys. I don't know like what the whole process is, but like, because not just Final Fantasy 16, it may be lesser known to some people in chat, but even Final Fantasy 7 Remake actually had like some guys who worked on like Monster Hunter doing stuff to help for Final Fantasy 7 Remake's combat system. So Square has been like trying to get Capcom people for quite some time. I think that's a great thing, by the way, because I think that Square's, you know, instead of trying to get all their turn-based people to just, you know, figure out action combat on their own, they're actually getting people who kind of know what they're doing to be able to create those combat systems.
For sure.
Which leads us into our first topic today. What are your thoughts on Final Fantasy XVI's Dominance trailer?
So you and I have talked about this a little bit, and I think we're in agreement about a lot of this stuff, which was that it was a good trailer. It was a very good trailer for anybody other than literally you and I.
Yeah.
Because it was an awesome trailer. It was very exciting. Had a lot, you know, it kind of gives you a really good idea of what the game's about, what the tone's going to be, you know, the world, all kinds of stuff. But it was, if for someone who's been following every little piece of information we've gotten so far, watched the previous trailers 16 times, just 16 times specifically for symmetry. I didn't even say that. Like, that was just an accident that I said 16. You know, read the website a dozen times, literally had podcast discussions, theorizing stuff. The new trailer didn't have a lot of new stuff in it. It didn't have a lot of, like, really big new information. The main thing that we saw was that there's gonna be icon, like, you're gonna be able to play these big kaiju boss fights, which I know we're gonna talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, a lot of it was, you know, okay, so there's gonna be this mysterious thing going on. This is the second icon of fire. There's all these different nations fighting each other. This is kind of the tone. These are some of the characters. This is kind of what combat looks like. You know, we generally got a lot of that the last time around. I think that you and I and some other freaks out there probably would have liked to get a better sense of, like, okay, but what do you do when you're not DMCing? Like, what does walking around a town look like?
Right.
Is this like an open world game? Is this zones, like a 12 or a 14? And how is this gonna function? But I also acknowledge that, like, now that we know this is not coming out until next summer, showing that stuff now would have been a mistake. Because they need to, if they're saying, all right, we're beginning the marketing campaign now, 1 year lead up to release, they need to dole that stuff out slowly. For us, because we've been waiting a year and a half for more information, it's a little bit of a disappointment, but I can also acknowledge that in the long term, as someone who has made videos about, railed against hype machines and hype trains and trying to get people excited for games 5 years before they come out, if they were to go too hard and too fast right now, it would destroy at least but a lot of other people's kind of emotional stamina for being invested in this product. So, you know, I get it. I get why the trailer was the way that it was. I can be a little bit personally disappointed, but I got over it after like a week, so, you know, it's fine.
Right.
Sorry. Other than that, I guess I'll ask. One thing I want to talk to you about is how do you feel about the user interface stuff with the
Okay.
That's like my only, like, even vague negative with the actual content of the trailer.
So when I first saw it, I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? That looks so ugly, right? And
the numbers where I was like, they're too big.
Right, yeah.
That one bit where Clive is comboing a staggered enemy.
Covers the whole enemy.
Yeah, you can't see him or the enemy because just the number 15 in big gold letters is just filling up the entire number. Dozens of them are filling the screen.
Yeah. So there are elements of the UI that kind of like grew on me. Like, for example, at first I didn't like how colorful it was. I was like, it's too colorful compared to like some of like the footage that I'm seeing, right? It doesn't seem to like really matched. But somehow, like after looking at it for a really long time, I kind of enjoyed seeing that colorful green health bar and like the really deep crimson red enemy health bar. But that being said, I still think that there needs to be a lot of work toward not necessarily muting it, but toning it down like a little bit so that it feels more natural with the game's environment. I guess coming off of like 15 and 7R, which I think both have really good HUDs that are fairly minimalist, but still feel very Final Fantasy in like their HUD design, I felt like it was a little bit jarring to see all of that happening like with the HUD. But I really think if they could just mute it like 10 or 20%, reduce those enemy damage numbers, because those things are huge and they cover up like the entire screen, and just refine it a little bit more, I think it'll be okay. I really like that the limit break bars were like a direct callback to 14. Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
I will say, because you mentioned liking the UIs of 15 and 7R, and while I'll generally agree, I will say one thing that I remember vaguely from my long ago experience with 15 was that you like were constantly losing track of how much health Noctis had, and that is one benefit from the standpoint of action video game, of that big green bar up in the corner, right? Of like you're going to be able to always in your peripheral vision see where you're at in there, which 7 Remake I think did a much better job of that than 15 did. I never felt surprised when I went into critical health in that game or whatever.
Right. And that's also like really important in 14 too. And so the UI design, really, the longer I looked at it, the more it kind of reminded me of like a more like or less refined version of 14's, right? Because 14 also has like a green health bar, and then it's got like a giant, but it's not like obnoxiously red as like that health bar is, but it does have like the red health bars in the same way. So I feel like maybe they should reference like 14's UI a little bit more. In fact, from my knowledge, it's the same guy who designed 14's UI working on this.
Did the Night Sky Prince just say that someone should reference Final Fantasy 14 for game design?
I know. You'd never expect to hear that from me, of all people.
I guess I guess that was a lot of negativity out of me with regards to the trailer there. Again, like I think it was good overall.
Yeah, for sure.
Swung to that stuff there. I would say we talked a lot last time around about being Evil East pilled and Matsuno pilled, and like getting to jump into these rooms where people are talking about these war meetings, right, where people are talking about the situation, even the brief glimpses that we get in the trailer and stuff. It can be hit or miss, because there's some stuff where any Lost Odyssey fans in the chat don't get mad at me, because I'm not a Lost Odyssey expert, but my impression from the outside looking in on Lost Odyssey, of only having watched some of it, is like that game's pretty good, but every time it cuts to dudes in a room talking about like, war is coming, we must prepare, and our allies, it seems like that's like the worst part of that game. For the most part, like it has very little to do with like the stuff you're actually engaged with. So like, that kind of stuff can be boring and draw you out of the experience. But in something like an FF Tactics or an FF14, it can be a really, really effective way of upping the stakes and fleshing out what's going on with the setting. Like, as a direct point of comparison, a Final Fantasy VII Remake, you don't really have anybody to cut away to. Like, we do cutaways to, what's Heidegger talking about? What's President Shinra talking about? But it's like the scene is pretty much always exactly the same, and it's Heidegger going, we're gonna catch him in some kind of trap. Like there's not a lot of complexity to it, and that's not a bad thing, because that story you're following, you're almost always in the perspective of whoever your player character is, right?
Right.
I think about like I remember in Final Fantasy 15, once or twice it cuts away to show you like all of the Imperial generals whose names you immediately forget and who don't matter like to the entire story, because a couple of them show up to be boss fights once or twice, and other than that they're just irrelevant. One of them is like Prompto's dad, and he only shows up in the DLC. It's my point is I think that in a setting like this, again, with the writer whose name I forget once again, but who did A Realm Reborn and who did Heavensward.
I want to say Kazutoyo Mahiro.
I think that's right. Being able to jump into those types of perspectives, to be able to create, it can be used to create much higher intensity situations, because you have an idea of what's at stake. You have an idea of stuff that's happening beyond just what your protagonist is seeing at that moment. And that's not something that, odd though it may sound, that's not something that a lot of Final Fantasy games do, which I think is why a lot of people, to back up to 12, a lot of people were tricked with Final Fantasy 12 into thinking the main characters didn't do much, because it cuts away to other people talking about stuff. Like, you know, in a Final Fantasy 10, you never cut away from Tidus pretty much ever. Other than, like, I think one time you play as Yuna in a dungeon when they get captured by the Church of Yevon, right? Yeah. Like, you know, Final Fantasy 7, you're pretty much always locked into Cloud's perspective. 8 is always Squall or Laguna flashbacks. Because the sense of scale and what's happening in the world beyond what's affecting the characters at that moment doesn't tend to come up very much. But you play a Tactics or you play a Final Fantasy 12 or an FF14, and there's a much greater sense of this is a much larger living, breathing place. There's stuff happening when the main character isn't around. Major events are happening. And I assume, since our main character seems like he's going to be alone for a lot of the game and not have any resources, you know, we're going to need to have those types of things to give us a sense of what's going on in this seemingly much larger conflict than just what Clive is up to.
Right. And that makes me want to ask you, how do you feel about having like a single character instead of having a traditional party member like system that we normally have?
I'll be totally honest with you. I think in like the Final Fantasy 16 coverage video I did back when the first trailer came out, I did say that I felt one of the most fundamental aspects of the series is the ensemble cast. That even if Clive was the only playable character, we'd probably have other significant companions following him around. I think, you know, you and I, we've had a lot of discussions of, like, some of us have pretty different, strong feelings philosophically about certain things of this series. That's one area where I'll get a little bit uppity about, like, I feel like it's an ensemble series. Because I'll be real with you, most of the ones where they're like only one character we're gonna focus on are like Dirge of Cerberus and Crisis Core.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I'd rather play Stranger of Paradise just because I get to listen to Jack and Ash and Jed talk about something.
Right.
That is a good point. Someone in chat points out Lightning Returns, and Lightning Returns is another solo experience. And though I'm not intimately familiar with Lightning Returns, everything I've seen of it suggests to me I'd at least like it better than Dirge of Cerberus.
Yeah, it's at least better than Dirge. I would say that much. Both story and gameplay wise.
I'm very much open to the series experimenting and trying new stuff. But I don't know. I wonder if it really is going to be just Clive by himself the whole time, because that raises a concern for me. I guess one thing I will say about the narrative and the perspective of, like, okay, there's going to be all these other factions all concerned about stuff throughout the course of this storyline, and Clive is just a dude running around trying to kill Ifrit, which we'll get to in a minute. I think we've both got a lot to say about the Ifrit situation. I do have a slight concern that, like, okay, so we see there's some kind of nuanced political system going on in a lot of different factions, but then in the trailer, it's just like, okay, I'm gonna beat up everybody else's kaiju now, punch. And I hope that it isn't a situation where, like, there are other people over here having a really complicated story going on, and Clive is on the outside of that going, I'm gonna punch. I'm gonna punch really hard, which I guess, again, is part of what I would have liked to see more in this trailer. Is, like, thus far we've heard Clive say, I think, 2 lines of dialogue across both of these trailers. He's the main character, so I have no read on who he is, right? I have no sense of who he is yet, or really what his part in what seems to be a much larger conflict that's boiling will be. Other than he wants revenge. I'll kill you if it's the last thing I do.
That's like the only line that we have for his characterization.
And I am Joshua's shield. I am sworn to protect him. I think that's the only stuff he's said out loud pretty much so far. So that's, you know. And not that it's a big deal, because the game will come out and we'll find out. But that's just the one thing I get worried about, because I think about people who complained about, like I said, FF12, people saying, like, oh, you don't do anything. It's the other stuff happens around you. I think people fundamentally misunderstand that story when they say stuff like that. But, like, what we've got presented right now is there's a bunch of different factions that all have stuff going on, and there's one very angry man. Which is, you know, we got 2 trailers, so that's not what it's gonna be. Just something that sticks out to me.
I think if they're referencing Final Fantasy XIV, then they'll have, like, a lot of success with it, because a lot of the political events in FF14 tend to revolve around the Warrior of Light, and the Warrior of Light is very active in those events. And that's in a game where it seems like it would be more difficult to implement, and they managed to make that work. And I think one of my favorite things, I won't go into too much detail because I don't know where everyone's at in 14, but there is a scene in Stormblood where you sit down and have like a meeting with the Emperor, and you have like the Scions there, and it's like a very political discussion, and you talk about all the things that have basically transpired in the game so far, and it is just extremely well voice acted scene, extremely just the tension in the room that you could very much feel, especially when the Emperor just kind of starts owning you on a whole bunch of political issues that you're just like kind of leave all your characters like speechless. So I think that like these very politically driven stories, the best way to do it, honestly, is to put the MC kind of at the centerfold of the conflict. And I think that they might be doing that with Final Fantasy 16 because of the presence of these like so-called dark icons, right? And Clive being like a dark icon that at least that like it says that like Benedicta Harmon is looking for, and
I got some stuff to say about that in a minute.
Yeah, and then Hugo, they seem to they seem to be having a meeting discussing Clive. Like they're worried about Clive, and Hugo is basically like, "Yeah, I'm a tear his ass up."
If we fight, it would cause massive destruction.
Yeah.
And the description for Bernadika, or whatever her name is, says like that she and Clive are like-minded. With some regard. And since he seems to be in some way or another acquiring the powers of the other dominants, that would certainly make him at least potentially an influential figure in this world. Also, I just wanted to say, Susie, the Sphere Hunter is in chat, said FF12 is awesome and Vaughn isn't that bad. I said it. Yes, he isn't that bad, especially once you realize Ash is the actual main character and he's just a POV character. And you're like, okay, great, I got it.
This is fine. Oh, man. Also, yeah, hello, Susie. We're going to have Susie back on here pretty soon for those who are happy.
I'm sure Susie's having a great couple of weeks recently.
Yeah. Resident Evil is doing some really cool stuff right now.
When they showed they were adding third person to Village, I was very impressed by that. Sorry, not to derail the conversation. I just
No, for sure. That made me like really excited too, because now I have like a whole reason to play through that game again. I think that's just like a really cool DLC you can put out to like make people enjoy the game again.
But no, like I said, that was just kind of a vague concern that I have about potentially how they're going to handle Clive in this. But it's like it's because I have negative information right now. I'm sure it's going to be totally fine. Like you said, the warrior. And honestly, I think that 14 is a good example of like really you only ever play as one character. Your party is, especially for the first couple of expansions, mostly people who just say, "Hey, you need to go over there," or like, "While you're doing that, I'll go do this." Mostly all they do is research. They just save you the trouble of going and reading books.
Yeah.
Most of the time, like in A Realm Reborn, mostly all they're doing is like, you go fight things, I'll go read. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine by me. You can come back and give me the abridged version of the important stuff later. Right. The only people who do anything, I'm convinced the only people that the Scions of the Seventh Dawn need to function are you and Tataru. Everybody else would be cut and the meta wouldn't lose much.
Yeah, basically. I mean, you're kind of like a one-man army, right? So, and I think
I can do everybody else's job, but I can't do Tataru's job.
Yeah, Tataru actually puts in all the real work, right? Like all the paperwork that I really don't want to do. And all the sewing and all the Tataru is the best.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, I actually think that we are going to have party members, but not in the traditional sense of the word. I'm working on a video on this, so I'm basically just going to spoil it right now. I don't know if the video will be up before this is up on YouTube or what, but if you're in here live, basically my thesis on how this game is still going to have party members but not party members is that we've already seen in the Awakening trailer that there are guest party members. There are people who are fighting alongside Clive. If you look at them, they look like, kind of like not really significant NPCs.
Yeah, just soldiers, just grunts.
Right, but we know that there is a guest party member system from that. I'm thinking that there is going to be people coming in and out of your party or party, I should say, and they'll be following you around. They'll be going with you on certain missions, escorting you, etc. But it's not like they're going to be like a permanent fixture in your adventure, right? Like, so it's not going to be like, oh, Jill is like permanently in my party. I'm going to go through all of Jill's equipment. Jill is level 37. I don't think it'll be like that. And what I've likened it to in this video that I'm working on is basically, have you played Nier Replicant?
I haven't played it, but I've watched it plenty of times. Okay. So I got it.
So you know how like Kaine and like Emil are in a party with you, right?
But they're basically just cosmetic items that follow you around in terms of their actual relevance to the gameplay.
Right, exactly. But it still allows for banter to happen. It still allows for all like the party stuff, like the really good parts of having a party to happen, but you don't have to micromanage them. And so what you end up getting is the best of both worlds. You have a solo action game, which tends to work the best in terms of actual combat design, and then you also have a party-based system, right? And so they don't really have HP bars or you're not really managing them. They are fighting alongside you, but they don't do like really any damage. They're really just cosmetic there to make you feel that sense of camaraderie. And I think that's what they're going to do, and I think there's actually like a little bit of evidence of it, right? Because we see this scene with Shiva being summoned in the Dominance trailer, and me and my chat, we like slowed this down. We went frame by frame, and what we found is that Clive was still there. So it's not him transforming into Shiva or anything like that. So Clive is there, and then it cuts to Shiva using Diamond Dust, right? So it's kind of like a traditional FF summon where it seems like she just appeared and then she used Diamond Dust. Well, we know, at least from what the opening of the Dominance trailer shows us, that the Dominant has to be there and transform physically into the icon, from what we know at least, right? It doesn't seem like getting a blessing from a Dominant can like allow you to just summon them on your own. You still have to have the actual Dominant there, at least from what we know. So that would all imply that Jill was a guest party member alongside Clive, right? Assuming that Jill is Shiva's Dominant. We don't know yet, but it seems fairly obvious that she is. So assuming that she
I have no feelings on the whole Jill theory mongering thing. I'm not going to even go there.
You know, it may seem obvious right now, like we may be all sold on that, and then watch the game come out, and then it's totally not it. It was totally a misdirection for us to be so convinced, right? Because it's
because we know 5 characters' names, so people are trying to connect anything to anything. I'm not saying that it means that she isn't Shiva. Like I said, other people clearly put more thought into that than I have. It's just, you know, we got limited options when it comes to theory mongering right now. Though I will work blood from this stone later in this stream, chat.
Yeah.
I will yet work some blood from this stone. No, somebody else in chat mentioned KH party members in a negative aspect with Donald healing them thing. But I'm going to say, actually, KH party members are a really good example of this sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
They're kind of cosmetic, but the thing they do to make them feel more like party members isn't even like, oh, they've got equipment, oh, they can heal you. To me, the thing that's really neat is the limit breaks that you get in like a KH2, right? And I guess the team attacks in KH3, but I don't want to give KH3 credit, I'm sorry. But no, like I would think that something you could do, because it's difficult in a game with this level of complexity in combat design. And we've got a character who, just in this trailer, we see the equivalent of like 4 or 5 different style switches, if we want to use DMC parlance, right? And you know, even the DMC games really can only sustain 3 characters, maybe 4, right? Playable characters in terms of that level of complexity that you're trying to bring to the table. And so like asking for a character on Clive's level of gameplay complexity, you know, I really can't see that happening. But maybe they introduce characters who are a little bit simpler than him, that you can play as temporarily, who maybe only have 1 or 2 styles or don't have a style to worry about at all. Or you just have AI-controlled party members that have team attacks. Or even something like Sonon, right? Even like just combo moves you can perform with them in some way. Or they have limit breaks that you can activate that are some kind of cooperative move that you do. You know, just anything, like you said, anything that makes you feel like they're there with you could be very effective. But again, we're a ways out from the game, and anything yet is possible. I forget what it was. There was some big thing with 7 Remake. I don't remember what it was. There was something like that they didn't show for a while that was like, of course it'll be in the game, but like just, it was like, everybody was convinced it wasn't going to happen because it hadn't been shown in a trailer yet, even though it was like a standard mechanic that would have, I forget what it was. There's one thing that I remember that was really funny, but it's like, I can't think of it now. You know, we'll see what happens is my point. We haven't seen a lot of the game yet. Like I said, they gotta pace out their information. We got another year to go on this bad boy. It's still going to be a little while yet.
Right. Were you really disappointed when you found out that it was going to be like a year away?
Okay. So I got some problems. Me and Yoshi P now, we're enemies now because he told me things. He lied to me. No, so I mean, like I said, I've spent a lot of time railing. It's not just Square, other games in general. Like this feeling of like the way that marketing is handled can be so frustrating. With games that are announced so far out in advance that you completely lose all of your steam on. And so when Yoshi P said, you know, we don't want to show too much right now. We want to tell you until we have a really polished and show it off. We want to be able to do this and that and that and this. And he said, like, the particular thing that threw I think everybody off was you know, we don't want to show it too early. We want to be able to show it. We want to be able to show so much at one go to show off everything that the game is, so that people can go, please give it to us now. And then we can say, okay, here you go. Which to me implied big media blowout within like 6 months of release. Was kind of how that felt to me, right? And to be fair, this trailer that we got wasn't the described, like, we want to be able to show everything. We want to be able to get everybody so excited because, again, the only real new feature we saw in this was Kaiju fights, and those were limited to, like, it looked like cinematic finishing moves. We didn't really get a sense of how it plays. I felt a little bit miffed that, like, that not even before the trailer happened, right? I was very appreciative that the only times we heard anything about FF16 was at a panel where Yoko Taro was just said, hey, tell me something about FF16, right? And I heard we heard about 3 times last year. That was exactly what I wanted, because that way the game is not on my mind. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not devoting any emotional stamina to it. No mental bandwidth. I'm not thinking about it until it's getting closer, right? And then in like the couple months before we got this new trailer, I was getting little bits of information like every other week. And I was like, I don't want anything. Don't tell me anything until you got something to tell me. Don't be like, yes, the trailer is finished and it looks really good and the game is stop. I don't want to hear anything. That's just me though. No, when they said it was coming out in a year, I felt that wasn't the sense that I'd been getting from all the rhetoric up to that point. But all things considered, like, it's not a big deal. You know, we were making a lot of suppositions about what was going on behind the scenes. We didn't have, as much information as maybe we felt that we did. And if nothing else, game probably gonna be really good. Game's gonna be good. That's all that really matters at the end of the day, is the feeling of waiting will fade from everybody's memory, and eventually it'll just be the feelings about the product. And ultimately a year is not that long to wait.
So I know I can't be the only one that felt like this, but did you feel more hyped by the screenshots that they released subsequently after the trailer than the trailer itself? Because that's what I personally felt.
A little bit. I don't know if I would say more hyped, but definitely they tickled my brain a little bit more. You know, because like I said, the trailer was like, okay, yeah, I know this is kind of what I expected the game to look like. Being shown like, okay, here's a big marsh with absolutely nothing in it. I'm like, is that a game area? Is that like a vista I'm gonna stand and look at with an invisible wall? What kind of video game is this? And it's it really inspired a certain amount of it gave a clearer sense that not of what the game is, but simply of that we don't know what it is.
Right.
You know, it was like, hey, listen, you don't know what this video is, so just hold your horses and we'll show you more later.
Right.
I definitely reacted very positively to those screenshots.
Yeah, same. I remember when I was playing Elden Ring, and I would come up on, I forget the name of the castle, but it's like this beautiful like fantasy castle, like dark fantasy castle that you come up on in Elden Ring. And I was just like, man, I really hope that Final Fantasy 16 has a moment like this, right? Because if we're gonna be
like this.
right, because I'm like, if we're in a medieval setting and we're we're in a fantasy setting. Like, this is the type of vista that like I want to see, like coming up on like this gigantic, beautiful castle. I think it was Stormvale. I'm not sure, chat. But it was really nice, and like I really wanted that feeling from FF16. And then they showed off a screenshot where Clive is coming up on, I believe it's Sambrique, and it's like
the equivalent of the Holy Roman Empire city or whatever.
Yes, and it's like and you see that like massive castle in the distance, and it looks like when you see the city that you can just dynamically like walk into it from where you are on the world map, and I'm just like, yeah, that's what I want. That's the thing I want to see, right? But and I know that's the thing that you really want to.
Map here, so I was able to pull it up.
Oh, okay, cool. So I think that like from our perspective as like, you know, kind of like RPG Final Fantasy nerds, I think we kind of like really want to see a lot of that stuff, like especially with traversing the world, actually seeing like what Clive is doing in terms of like how he actually is interacting with the people around him and the enemies, and what exploration actually looks like. Because I think that in both this and Rebirth are going to be what I assume very exploration-driven games, right? So that's also going to be interesting too, is that we're going to see 2 other takes aside from 15 on how they can create kind of like a modern RPG where there's a world that you can explore. Not necessarily open world, right? But like exploration has kind of been a thing that I've been wanting to see like really feel good in Final Fantasy game. And I think that in 15 there were some strong moments, right? Like when I would find like a dungeon or some side content, I'd be like, oh, this is really cool. But I think that there is also a lot of criticisms that one can draw about 15's world design as well. So the thing that I just really want to see from this game is what this world actually looks like, and looking at like the world map and seeing like, is that really going to be realized? Are we really going to feel like...
That's exactly what I felt I wanted to see in the next FF16 trailer, which is why I was a bit disappointed. But then, of course, again, like I said, I realized, oh, we've got a year to wait, so I'm not going to see that for a while, and that's the correct decision to not show me that right now. But yes, that's exactly what I want to see too.
Right. And I kind of agree with that too, because if I see that, I'm going to want it right now. I'm going to want it right now. Exactly. Right? And I think... because I think Final Fantasy XVI's hype hasn't been insane at the moment, because for the most part, the only people who get it, and not to say that like, oh, you don't get it, but it's like the only people who are truly like intuitively understanding what they're looking at is kind of the Final Fantasy XIV players and the Evilise people. Like they already...
you're either Eorzea get pilled or Matsuno pilled. Those
right.
people really have an idea of what's going on here.
Right, and those people look at it and they're like, yeah. Like, I know exactly what this is, and I am into it all the way. But I think outside of that, you have like a really big casual Final Fantasy audience who's very much like, this seems weird, there's no party, this isn't like, you know, because, you know, a lot of people aren't very into like medieval high fantasy stuff, even though that's where Final Fantasy started. But there's a lot of people who are very...
One was 12, and these same people say they don't like 12. So you know what? I don't know what to tell them other than just that they should rethink things.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing too, right? Because like if you really look at it,
people who say, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, if you really look at it, right, there's only 4 modern Final Fantasies: 7, 8, 13, 15, and then you have 10, which is Asian fantasy as opposed to medieval European fantasy. But like
a little bit of sci-fi post-apocalypse mixed in there, yeah.
Right. Although that could be argued the same with the medieval fantasy ones too, where you always find out there is there's
that is one thing. A lot of people freak out about, like, you know, man, when did Final Fantasy get so weird? And then you're like, have you read the Wikipedia plot synopsis for Final Fantasy 1? Right?
Yeah.
Like, this has always been a little bit funky.
Yeah.
And the series is.
Yeah, Final Fantasy, I think it can be as weird as it wants to be. Weird is kind of actually like what it thrives on. It's you have to make the weird into a good, compelling story, which historically, I'd say for the majority of the franchise, they have done. A few times I feel like where they have missed it, and it was just weird without the compelling aspect of the weird. But for the most part, I think that they've managed to nail the making the weird compelling, right? Because there's a fascination with the weird in general, but when you can make the weird interesting too, and like really human and really interesting, that's when it resonates the most.
I would say very often the weird is a backdrop to the human and the compelling and the interesting.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
you know, I mean, I think Titus and Yuna's story is a really good example. I'm not going to discuss any, I think at this point, probably I don't need to worry about spoiling 10, but I'm not going to anyway, just in case. But like, you know, the relationship of what's going on there and what the two of them need to learn and what needs to be achieved, like the themes are made much clearer by the revelations about the nature of the world and where Titus is from and the time travel stuff that's going on. Like the themes are illuminated much more clearly and brought out much more strongly. But if it was simplified into a real world context, you could find a way to, you could tell the exact same emotional backbone between those two characters, right?
Right.
You're kind of using these fantasy elements, these very odd elements to excite, to set the imagination on fire and to really push the way that these things feel, to enhance the feelings.
God, maybe someone can get the exact quote. I've used it in a video before, but fantasy is basically about revealing the truth behind human nature. Like as a genre, really, that's what fantasy is all about. And so we use like kind of like these abstract, weird concepts to show kind of like the truth of human nature. Like even if things were different set up nature, that nature kind of followed a different set of rules, that like human beings will always kind of be the same thing that they are, right? Like that's kind of like what's powerful about like fantasy as a genre. And I think as long as you keep it about that and it doesn't like get too entangled in its own lore, which I felt that like some Final Fantasy games, or some Square Enix games in general, I should say, have done, then I think that the weird is awesome. I love the kaiju fights. Actually, before we talk about like Rebirth, that's like the last thing on 16 I really want to touch on. How do you think the kaiju fights are going to work?
Oh, I throw my hands in the air at that one. Because I'm going to be real with you. Because I will say, last time around, we do have one more thing we need to talk about with 16. Because we're going to talk about some Ifrit stuff.
You're right. Two more things. Yes.
We'll go back to those. Well, yeah, there's two more things here. We'll go back to those in a second. But with regards to the kaiju combat stuff, I think last time around, I pitched like an idea for an FF spin-off where it's like you play as like a summoner from a decimated tribe who aids a country that's being invaded by Magitech, and there's very little on the ground. Like there's just walking around a base gameplay, like the combat is all summoning kaiju. The difficulty with my theory, with my idea for that'd be a cool game to make, is there are very few good kaiju games. There are like no good Godzilla games. There are very, actually, like, I guess you would say traditionally good. There are a lot of like schlock good games of like beat 'em ups with two big things stomping around a city or whatever. There aren't a lot of games that really give an intensely satisfying feeling of being this massive creature and beating down on something else. And so, I really don't know exactly how they are going to design that stuff. They got, as we've been talking about, they got some really solid combat design pedigree here on Final Fantasy 16 that makes me hopeful that they'll figure something out. But especially since this trailer only shows these kind of cinematic finishing moves, I don't really know what to think. All I can think is I hope that it comes out well, but it's like I'm hard pressed to even think of a game that's done that sort of thing in that was actually a good, like a really solid experience. You know what I mean? Nothing really comes to mind.
So I have a theory, right? And I want to shout out to like my comment section and some people in chat who kind of suggested this. And I think
I want to hear
my theory kind of has taken it to like another level, because my chat and a lot of people on my YouTube comments were suggesting, what if these kaiju fights were turn-based? And I thought that's really interesting, and maybe that can work a lot better than having to operate like imagine like trying to fight as like Titan or something, and it's like this big slow moving rock guy. And I thought that was a really cool idea, right? So, but then I really got to thinking about it, and I'm almost like, you know, what if you have like this tactical style mini game, and it's actually like a war that you're fighting, and
the icons are just among the units that you're controlling?
Right, and your icon is basically a unit. And you're controlling soldiers. Type 0 has something as like a mini game similar to this. And I'm thinking like, what if you take that mini game and maybe like some influence from tactics, and you have like those large scale wars? Because think about like what we've seen from the Dominance trailer, especially.
Yeah, how do we communicate that into anything other than a cutscene?
Right,
with real-time tactical sequences where you're playing as an icon and controls. Very interesting.
Right, and so almost like a game of chess, where the icons are like the king, right? So you have to kill the other person's icon in order to win the match. And so you have
other objectives you have to complete to be able to get close enough to do that. You got to take out artillery. You got to get past other weapon emplacements to be able to get to the enemy.
Right. And I think they've already shown it to us, and we didn't even realize it, because they get like, think about the scene where Odin is like slicing through Mega Flare, right? So like, what if you were controlling those ground soldiers, right? Because they show the war happening while that's going on. So what if you're controlling those soldiers and you're playing like that Type 0 tactics-esque mini game where you're fighting, and then you're also controlling it through turn-based combat? And that's how they end up introducing or keeping like a turn-based element into the game by having like these large-scale wars actually be like a turn-based, big-scale turn-based battle.
No, I like this. This is a good idea. This could be very interesting. That could be a good way of implementing. Yeah. Because I mean, the whole conversation I was having a second ago about like my concern of my probably unfounded concern, but my present concern, since I don't have much to look at, of like how involved can Clive be in this conflict, and how can you depict this stuff at a scale like within gameplay? Is all this other stuff just going to be cutscenes? This is a good idea. I like this. This is very interesting.
Yeah, I think
I'm into that. I got nothing to say other than I'm into that.
Yeah, chat seems to like it too. I see, oh yes, please. That's peak Final Fantasy. So I think chat seems to like that idea too. I think it'd be a great idea, and I think it'd be a way of having like turn-based gameplay in a modern Final Fantasy game, and also having it be action for like all the other stuff too, but then also making those large-scale wars, because again, you know, you look at those large-scale wars, I think it'd be lame if those large-scale wars are just cutscenes, right? Like if that's like not something,
Totally agree.
Right? Because those are incredibly big world events, and if you're just watching them, then it's like, oh, well, this is like, I'm just watching, you know, somebody else, all these other people, you know, make this big impact on the world, and I'm separate.
You're getting involved in something much sneakier, which we'll talk about when we talk about this other lady in a minute that was on our docket to discuss. But no, yeah, I understand your point completely.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of that, we'll go into the point about icons. So last time you were on, we discussed theories regarding Ifrit. I said that Clive's Ifrit, and you said that is actually someone who is from a different country, basically like a secret weapon of mass destruction, who was used to set off a war. And after the Dominance trailer, the last few seconds, where you can clearly see two Ifrits, it seems like we may both be right.
No, when you sent me a message about this, you were like, it seems like we may both be right. I was like, he ruined the bit I was going to do. I was going to come in and be like, I come into you with my hat in hand. Clearly Clive is Ifrit. But what if we were both right?
Yeah.
But no, it's you know, we like I said, just to give everybody a quick recap, last time we were on, we discussed your theory that Clive is somehow, he is secretly the dominant of Ifrit. And doesn't know it at the beginning of the game. There's this discussion of a dark icon in some of the press stuff that's been released so far. And then my discussion was that we have another nation called the Iron Kingdom, which is off the coast, shares the same crystal source as the Duchy of Rosaria. But it said that any dominants born there are considered heretical and they're put to death. once they are discovered, right? And I said, it's odd to list this country that's detached from all the other politics and doesn't speak the language of the land, and that their dominant is unknown. So it's like, it would make a lot of sense, and it would be a very kind of not Matsuno FF14 political writing decision to say that somebody in this world infiltrated that country, found the current dominant before they could be executed, and removed them, and living memory of this dominant is gone. You know, people don't know what it is or who it is or where it came from, so this could then be used as a secret weapon to kick off a war. Because from the description of the world on the website, it seems like there's a tentative peace. But obviously in the trailers that we see after a time skip, there's gonna be an all-out war. And this could be used to kick things off and rebalance power without there being an obvious belligerent, or at least perhaps one of the other smaller nations that wants to start some crap could go ahead and do it, right? But like you said, it becomes a little funky now if that's the case. And that's hypothetically, maybe that could be right, because like you said, there seem to be 2 Ifrits at the ending of the trailer, and it also definitely seems to be directly implying that Clive is Ifrit. A bunch of stuff. It seems like we could both be right. There's a lot to think about here.
It's so...
For the moment,
yeah,
like you said, it's probable that Clive is Ifrit. But just for the sake of argument, let's say that the dominant of Ifrit is a man named Pepe Silvia. Just for the sake of debate, okay? We're gonna break into this a little bit. I got some stuff to say here, all right? So, in our first trailer, ladies and gentlemen, in the very first trailer that we received, we got this important line here. A second icon of fire? That's impossible, says the man as he's knocked down onto the ground, looking up at a big fire thing exploding, right? So this is the key statement that ties everything together. A second icon of fire, that's impossible. How could this be? What's going on here, all right? So, we got some important stuff to cover. First of all, we got Phoenix. Ladies and gentlemen, Phoenix. It is said on the website that the Duchy of Rosaria is home to the dominant of Phoenix, the icon of fire. We had some discussion last time around a second icon of fire. What could this mean? Especially now there are 2 Ifrits running around. So, I wonder what they mean by a second. Let's assume for a moment their first icon of fire is in fact the dominant of Phoenix, right? The Phoenix is the first icon of fire, right? But we have this other detail over here. We have the Iron Kingdom and an unknown icon. We don't know anything about it, and it seems like most people in this world don't know anything about. Now, an element of the story, one way or the other, is that there is some mysterious person who is the dominant of Ifrit. So there is a mysterious dominant out there, right, that we don't know anything about from this location, perhaps otherwise. And Ifrit seems to be unaccounted for because the reaction is, I don't know who that is. That's impossible. Never heard of anything like that. It seems like, especially with the lineup that we've shown us so far, all of the different characters are different. All the different summons are different elements, right? You know, we don't really have doubles other than this boy and Ifrit. So we're left to think to ourselves, okay, so mysterious dominant Ifrit is unaccounted for. Makes sense that it comes from the Iron Kingdom, especially because the Iron Kingdom and the Duchy of Rosaria share the same mother crystal. Perhaps and it's literally located inside of a volcano, so they're both fire elemental. Okay, all right, so this is getting pretty interesting here, okay? But then, we gotta go over here for a second. Let's loop back over here to the information that we know about Rosaria. It said on the website that it was expected for Clive, the firstborn of the High House, to receive Phoenix, to become the dominant of Phoenix, but it eventually went to his younger brother, Joshua. This was unexpected, but not, it seems, unprecedented. People, at least the website doesn't imply that people were freaked out about it, just that it was expected he would get it. It went here instead. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Now, this leads me to some other thoughts, right? Because, like you said, what if, wait a second. What if this guy is also Ifrit, right? But it'd be a little bit odd for this thing to appear out of nowhere in this family line. So the only explanation is that Clive is adopted. Clive is not actually the son of the Duke of Rosaria. We already know that they adopted Jill Warwick to try and reduce turmoil up in the fallen northern territories, right? Or whatever they said. So what if there was all kinds of craziness going on? There was a lot of tension. It said that their power is being diminished. The influence of the duchy is being diminished by, among other things, the Blight. Maybe in order to try and secure their position, because the king was having difficulty, siring an heir. Screw it. Just get an heir. Get one just for now, just so it looks like the House of Rosaria is stable. So he's adopted. But then this, well, then that's certainly a question, isn't it? Well, if Clive is Ifrit, could Clive be the mysterious dominant from the Iron Kingdom who is unaccountable? Could, in the ongoing territorial dispute over the crystal that these two nations share, could they have actually gone in and nabbed the kid from the Iron Kingdom? And that's who Clive is. Interesting. Very interesting to consider. But then we have this whole other issue, because last time around we discussed the hypothetical possibility of could he actually be Ifrit himself, right? And I had some concerns about this personally, because I felt like, I joked last time, you'll recall, what would happen when the developers from the FF16 went to the cafeteria at Square and said, we're going to have this story where the main character turns into a Ifrit and accidentally kills his own people and he wants revenge, but oh no, it was me, Ares, you made me kill my wife and daughter, no! And then the guy across the table says, we're making a game called Stranger of Paradise and we're also doing that. It'd be very awkward. It'd be very awkward. And I'm just going to say in general, other than Kratos, that one's actually a good example of this trope. Generally speaking, I don't like the story trope of character hulked out and killed somebody they loved. Unless, like, if it's like a supporting character in their backstory. But I don't want if the whole plot of this game is, I'll kill you if it's the last thing I do, and the reveal is, oh, it was me! That's going to be a little bit disappointing. So, we got all this stuff going on here, right? If this is the first Icon of Fire and we don't have another one, it's easy enough to assume the second Icon of Fire is in fact Ifrit. And Clive is Ifrit, is what we're thinking here. This trailer certainly seems to be implying that Clive is Ifrit. We see during boss fights, right? We see during the icon fights that we're seeing, Ifrit's health bar is always up on this side of the screen and the other one is over here, right? It's in the same position as Clive's health bar. The implication being possibly that we are playing as Ifrit, fighting all of these other dominants, right? We were discussing this a minute ago. This seems probable. It's in the same position as Clive's. But then there's something very odd. I don't know if you've noticed this. The first bit of summoning footage that we see in that trailer is a fight between Phoenix and Ifrit. That's the first bit of footage that we see. Now, it's not at the Duchy of Rosaria's like two-towered castle. There's a bunch of huge crystal spires in the background. We saw these briefly in the first trailer as well. We saw in the first trailer a fight between Phoenix and Ifrit. It was at these huge crystalline spires. Now, it is possible that this is like the ending of the game or something at some crazy location, or even it could be the prologue, right? In time immemorial, two great fire spirits fought for dominance, whatever, right? Who knows? But in that sequence where we see Phoenix and Ifrit fighting, Phoenix's health bar is on the same side as the player character. It's in the position where Clive's health bar would be, or where Ifrit's health bar is in all of the other fights. And over here, Ifrit's bar doesn't say Ifrit. It says the dark icon.
Oh.
So, the dark icon, ladies and gentlemen, this is discussed on the website that Clive's life is ruined. Clive's life is destroyed by the appearance of the dark icon. And it's specifically discussed that Bernadica, right? It says on her website, this espionage lady from Waloed, I think is the name of the country, she is hunting for the second Icon of Fire, and she meets with a like-minded Clive. So Clive does want revenge on an Ifrit-like figure that causes turmoil in his life, a dark icon. And we see at the ending of the trailer, two Ifrits. I'm writing really fast, and my handwriting just completely fell apart there because it's all dying here. So listen, this is the problem, right? This is the problem. This is where it gets really sinister. This is where it gets really nuts, okay? Because it says that a one person contains these things, right? Now, there's all kinds of potential options here. Maybe all of the dominants have a dark variation of themselves. I mean, that's always possible, right? Maybe every single one of these guys has a dark counterpart somewhere out there that we haven't found out about yet, and this is going to be one of the big reveals of the game. As you acquire the powers of all these other people, like Bernadica, maybe become friends with them, but you still have to fight them because there's evil versions out there. Maybe everybody's got that, right? Seems a little bit odd, considering that second Icon of Fire is already considered this weird, impossible thing. And we got this concept of a dark icon, something that's unknown that we don't really know that much about, right? And that Clive is out to get Ifrit. seems to be, but he also is Ifrit, and there seem to be two Ifrits, and it's only ever bound to one person at a time. The dominant is a single person. Not like a whole bunch of summoners can summon one thing. It's bound to a single person. There's only one explanation. Clive's evil twin! Clive has a twin from the Iron Kingdom. They're both out there somewhere. The other one is evil, and they're gonna have to fight. And that's why it took him so long to awaken to Ifrit in the first place. Because it seems like everybody else awakens to this stuff relatively early in life. Why didn't he? What's going on here, right? It's because Ifrit is dual aspected. And there's an incomplete control over it on the part of both Ifrit and his twin, right? They're both out there somewhere, and neither of them has complete control of their power. Somewhere, the dark icon, Clive's twin, is being trained to do sinister shit, right? And Clive doesn't know anything about this, but eventually when the dark icon appears and wrecks his life, this will cause some kind of resonance. When he sees Joshua getting the crap kicked out of him, and he's gonna freak out, and he will turn into a Ifrit as well. And they battle now. They battle now, and he must hunt and find his twin, who is the true villain of Final Fantasy 16, and that's why there's still the Phoenix and Ifrit fighting each other on the logo, because Joshua's still alive, and he's gonna be fine, and the final battle will be somehow Clive will support Joshua. I haven't figured that part out yet. Anyway, that's what I got. That's who Pepe Silvia is. It's Clive's twin.
Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest thing that has ever happened on this stream.
I try. Listen, I don't like doing the theory mongering stuff, but my brother and I were talking about this and we figured it out, and I was like, you know what? Go big or go home. That's the way it is.
For the record, by the way, just so everyone knows, I had no idea he had this plan. All he told me was, hey, I got a theory, and I'm going to explain my theory on the stream. And I was like, yeah, okay, man, that sounds good. He's like, yeah. I was like, go ahead and do your thing. I had no idea that it was going to be. That is so amazing. I am just as shocked as everyone in the audience, man. That was a fantastic moment. Oh,
well, thank you very much. I tried.
I am rolling. Okay.
So now that we've figured out the plot of the game, we can move on and talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is going to be much harder to untangle, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is. God, did you want to touch on Benedicta?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. You had a question. You wanted to talk a little bit about what is her name? Benedicta Harmon, the lady who looks like the head of the third country from A Realm Reborn that I can't remember the name of right now. From the third Asian Alliance.
Oh, Connie Senna. She looks like Connie
Senna.
There
you go. I don't know, when she showed up in the trailer, I was like, that's the same design. He just let her hair down, and now she battles now. You're cheating.
Do you think that she might be like the heroine of the game? Like, that's what I'm not trying to figure out.
I mean, it's possible. Obviously, we see Ifrit and her battling as a part of the trailer, but it seems like that's just going to happen as a matter of course with everybody throughout the game at this point. Oh yeah, so yeah, okay, this is important. I should note this also. Somebody in chat, really fast before we move on. Somebody in chat said, plot twist, young Clive and old Clive in the Awakening trailer are different people. My brother and I did think about this, that maybe it's going to be split between two different, like, twin siblings entirely. But no, again, if you guys will recall, people looked at that and it's like they had the same earring. There were others. So I think we are still playing as the same Clive post time skip the whole time, and his evil twin is out there somewhere, and we're trying to find him. But no, I forgot to address that because my brother and I did briefly go, oh my God, what if it's two different characters? But then we were like, no, that actually doesn't quite match up. But anyway, sorry. Back to Benedicta. It's noted that she's like the head of like espionage for Walud, or whatever, which appears to be the evil empire that's like, occupying the other, they have control of like the entire other continent. And that she has a dark, bloody childhood, but that she will meet up with Clive and they will be like-minded in some way. this is certainly an element where, when you were talking about a second ago, how do you get the player involved in these massive, large-scale battles, right? The alternative is that you don't get them involved, and a bit more like a Final Fantasy Tactics, because Ramza doesn't, there are huge battles with massive casualty figures happening in the background of Tactics, right, that you never see. Because basically, you as Ramza are running around kind of doing like the equivalent of modern day like special forces, like small activities to subvert stuff going on with the war effort and to learn stuff about what the Church of Glabados is up to. It would make sense if Clive, as we see him at the beginning of the Awakening trailer, he seems to be attached to some kind of special forces group that's like our target is the dominant and only the dominant, right? He seems to be doing something very underhanded and high risk, targeting, you know, he seems to be doing like the equivalent of SEAL Team 6 stuff in a medieval setting. And Benedika, if she's the head of Waloed's intelligence department, that would be very much a character who would get him tied up in a lot more behind the scenes type of stuff. That's the main thought that I have with regards to that character, is that would definitely play into maybe the entire story of what Clive is up to, is especially if he's trying to figure out who is the second Ifrit, and who is, and more importantly, who's its master? Who is behind all of this that's going on? Is it the church? It's the church. But you know, it could not be the church for once, but it's probably the church.
It's probably the church.
It's probably the church. And you know, if he's caught up in trying to find this person to get revenge, and in that process he's getting involved in more behind the scenes stuff and more backhanded trying to figure out what all these different secret stuff that's going on. You know, that could make sense. And having one of our main characters being introduced here as because we are to assume, I think, that Waloed's main summon is Odin, because their flag is just Odin. But it says that she is a dominant from Waloed. So I think it's safe to assume that some of these crystals can give out multiple dominants. But we don't have to assume, we already knew that, because the Iron Kingdom and the Duchy of Rosaria both have their own dominant, and they draw from the same crystal. So the crystals can hand out more than one dominant. There's also, we now know there are more summons in that trailer than there are crystals on the world map, so some people have to be doubling up. But yeah, so I am to assume that this character being part of the intelligence department of this other nation is going to be important, because that's going to be the type of stuff Clive is dealing in. Probably going to be like, after the time skip, he's going to be like down on his luck, mercenary, whatever, but he's going to increasingly become embroiled in all this espionage stuff to really figure out the true cause of the war. That's my guess of where the plot's going. Because that feels very Tactics. That even feels very FF14.
I agree.
So that'd be my guess of how a character like that factors in.
I agree. I'm curious to see them. Supposedly they're like-minded.
Yes,
but they also fight, right?
Because she says she's looking. It says she's looking for the second icon of fire. Both of them are hunting for Ifrit, right? It's interesting.
Right. And but then it also shows them fighting. So I'm wondering, do they fight first and then realize they're like-minded, or do they have some kind of strife after they've been working together?
Who knows? Or again, might be that every single icon is dual aspected, and every icon has a dark icon, and that's who we're seeing him fight.
Right.
In that footage. So, who's to say as yet?
It's a crazy number of icons, by the way, and these things are so detailed and massive. Yeah. It's just, it's really interesting to see. I mean, even if there are no more confirmed ones, just the ones that we have alone, it's just like, we haven't seen like summons get like this. I mean, like in Final Fantasy 15, they had like 6 total, and like 4 were playable, but like this is a lot. A lot. It's a very big number.
I mean, I guess, they decided we're doing, it's all about these guys, so go big or go home. A bunch of them.
Yeah, so like quantity-wise, we have so many, and then that's like probably the most surprising thing to me, is because like 13 we had 6. As generations have gone on, we've had like less and less summons, because 1, it's harder to integrate them into the plot, and 2, when you do integrate them into the plot, you usually downsize the number because you want to focus on a few in particular. But
for sure, yeah.
That is one of the cooler things about 16. But let's talk about some Final Fantasy VII stuff.
Sure.
Because I'm sure chat is burning to get into some of the stuff with Rebirth.
Everybody's burning to talk about Final Fantasy VII, man.
So let's start off with, how did you feel about the 25th anniversary showing?
It was fine. It was, My brother, who's away at college, called me. Well, I guess he's not in college right now, but the point is he's not here. He's not here. He's elsewhere. He called me like right when it started, and we watched it together. And specifically when we're gonna talk about some mobile phone games now. As soon as it faded out, I did the freaking the Snapcube Sonic 06 dub bit, and I was like, if they show first soldier footage, I'm gonna have a birth of cactuses out of my ass. And then they did, and I screamed. But you know what? Hey, you know what? At least that trailer, which they released 3 weeks ago, that made me think it was like they showed that trailer 3 weeks ago. I hope they don't show it at all since it's only 10 minutes. But then it went over 10 minutes, so it didn't matter. And that trailer was like trimmed down compared to the version they released previously. So it was fine. It was fine. You always go like, oh no, are they gonna blow it? Is this just going to be mobile phone games and merch? So you almost wish that they'd be like, you wish like up front Kitase would have been like, we have some big news, but first we're going to talk about, some merchandise and mobile phone games and music and other stuff, and just give us a few minutes, we promise. But whatever, the show's over, so it's fine. But no, it was, I'd say overall, it was a good show. It didn't waste our time. That's the main thing. Just don't waste my time these days of Summer Jeff Fest. I'm sitting there for 4 minutes listening to The Rock chill energy drinks. Just don't waste my time.
Yeah. I love how concise that it was, right? Mm-hmm. At first, I was like, with the first soldier and the merch stuff, I was like, oh no, did we get jebaited? And then they start showing Ever Crisis and stuff like that, and then I was like, oh, okay. They're showing the stuff that people actually want to see. Yeah.
I have very little to say about Ever Crisis, but I think it's really funny that the last time we saw that was over a year ago, and it was like coming 2022, and then this trailer ends with open beta 2022.
Right.
It's like something's going on there that we don't know about. It's like I don't know. Maybe it's just much more ambitious than I am anticipating that it is. Maybe it really is, because we talked about maybe it's just going to be hyper compressed retellings of these games. Maybe it's going to be a much more complete experience than I initially thought if it's taking them this long to put together. So that makes me slightly optimistic, though my interest in that has always been kind of relatively low. So that was the main thing, was just I thought it was kind of funny that it went from coming 2022 to open beta later in 2022.
Right. It is interesting. They showed off some of the costumes that they plan on monetizing with the game, because I thought that was actually fairly smart, because I can totally see FF7 fans like spending thousands of dollars trying to get like outfits for like Cloud and Tifa and Eric.
I won't spend the money, but I can't tell you how much of it's like characters. If I was making an animated TV series or something, like in animated shows, you don't change the characters' outfits because it's too expensive, right? I would drive producers nuts, because I'd be like, I want them to have 3 wardrobe changes per episode. I love alternate costumes for things. So yeah, when I saw that Samurai Cloud and even that weird Aerith costume that I didn't like that much, I was like, yeah, give me more of that, please. Inject that right into my... I love that stuff.
Yeah, no, it looks really cool. It kind of makes me wish that we actually had costumes like in the main remake.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at least it's just like an optional thing, but yeah, I think they don't do it because they think about like the FMVs and how jarring like the FMV. Because even like when I first played, I actually really didn't think too much about like Cloud's Buster Sword, like switching back, like when you see like a pre-rendered video.
There's like
I never
3
really
FMVs in the whole game.
Right. There's not that many, but when it does happen, I really didn't think about it too much. So they could get away with it on the sword, but then like, if Cloud's wearing a samurai outfit, and then it switches in the FMV, I'm gonna be like, wait.
Aqua has Minnie Mouse ears and angel wings on. You can't be doing that when you're cutting to FMV.
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, I imagine that the next game will probably make a little bit less use of FMVs, but who knows? It might actually make more use, depending on what it is they want to show. But other than Ever Crisis, I thought the Crisis Core remaster looks pretty good. Do you think?
I gotta say, I mean, like just being able to hit the attack button, and he does one attack and then another attack instead of an attack back to neutral position, another attack.
Yeah,
that takes the game up by like a full IGN number score.
Yeah, an actual combo. An actual
Still not a huge fan of Crisis Core, but at least it looks like it plays like a video That's all I demand of it, is play like a video game.
Yeah, Crisis Core's combat, in the original version at least, was not very good in my personal opinion. There was a lot of things that, I mean, beyond just like the DMW, because I know a lot of people hop right to like the slot machine mechanic, and that is a terrible thing. But even outside of that, like you were saying, there's not really an actual combo that Zack's doing. It's more like this like weird stiff attack, and then he does another attack. It's almost like they tried to make it like, I don't know, they tried to keep some elements of turn-based into it that didn't make it like flow like an actual action game system as well as it should have. And it really did feel like stiff and weird. And then most of the game honestly felt insanely easy, at least to me.
I mean, for real, like you know, people. I myself am guilty of complaining a little bit about the stiff combat of the Osaka Team Kingdom Hearts games, right? Of the BBS and DDD, but like nothing compared to the experience of Crisis Core, of activating combat mode and then maybe the worst melee string in an action RPG ever, constantly interrupted by a roulette machine pausing the action and taking up full screen prominence, and then conflict resolved, walk forward 5 more feet, and do it all over again. Like they do have the slot machine in the corner during the gameplay footage we see, but like all it has to do is just not because like, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't it interrupt you even if you get a failed roll in the PSP version?
Yeah, I'm
like
pretty sure. Like
match, it goes full screen so that and shows the third, and even if you don't get it, it still interrupts you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, just make it only interrupt me if it lands, and then the mechanic is honestly like fine. It's just the amount of time that it ate up was the real problem.
Right.
They fixed that and fixed swinging the sword, and it's like that game is infinitely more playable. That won't fix other problems that it has, but you know, hey, you can play the video game.
I wish you could like stack your rolls or save them up and like use them in an opportune way or something like that, because one of the problems I had with like Crisis Core's combat in the original was you would get a roll, right? But it's kind of out of your control. It's just something that happens, and then you get like this super powerful attack. You don't even have to aim it or anything.
On a standard Shinra grunt to finish the fight.
Right, and then like sometimes you'll just get in combat, get a great roll, and then the fight's over. You didn't really have to do anything. Or you're in a boss fight, and you'll just get a great roll. You'll roll a summon, and that's it. I mean, you're not even actually like really playing. It's just, you know, sometimes the RNG just happens and it's good. And also it kind of works that way for bosses too, right? Because sometimes bosses will be able to do these unavoidable attacks that, I mean, you can't even like run around or do anything. You just have to watch the boss. You have to watch them. You have to watch them basically do like this devastating attack. And that's on RNG as well. So it's not like you can be like, okay, well, the boss does this and this and this, and then they prepare for this, you know, unavoidable attack. So I know when this is going to happen, the unavoidable attack will just happen every now and then, and it's determined by the number generator, and there's just nothing you can do. Mm-hmm. So I know that they're going to be overhauling combat some. They haven't explicitly said it, but you can tell from the footage that there's a lot of things that are not the same from what they were in the original, especially like considering now you can like hotkey stuff in the same way you can with like Kingdom Hearts or the main remake, where you can hold like a trigger button and use hotkey attacks. But I'm just really wondering, how are they going to overhaul that combat well enough without, because this is a remaster, right? So they're still using Crisis Core's code and a lot of its assets upscale.
There's some bone. There's still the bones in there, yeah.
Right. So this is the same skeleton. They put some really good meat on it, I think. I think some of the models and the lighting and the new effects, I think they look really good. But this is at the core the same game that they're putting this stuff onto, and then they're going back and they're tweaking like a lot of stuff to make it better. But I'm like, how do they fix a lot of those systems?
I'm gonna make an argument that at some level, even just minor quality of life performances are kind of enough, because I mean, it's worth noting that attach the asterisk legally to this sentence. Crisis Core hasn't been playable at all for quite some time, right? And you know, considering that there hasn't been a version of it out there, period. And considering that it's probably being done, I don't want to say this in an insulting way because the game looks fine, but it's probably being done relatively cheaply. Like a B team somewhere in Business Division 17 or whatever, you know, right? Like it's and I don't mean that to disparage the work being done on it or anything at all. It looks like the exact amount of money that I would want to be spent on it is being spent. Like, and I wouldn't want a penny more because it doesn't need to get glammed up to modern fidelity, right? In fact, I'm sure there's at least probably a slight consideration. The trailer shows that it's going to be available on Switch, and like most Square isn't able to sell a lot of games on Switch unless it's like something that's like a Chocobo GP or whatever. It's like a really low level designed for that type of market in the first place. And so, you know, I don't know how much, as someone who's not a huge fan of the game in the first place anyway, even saying that, I don't know how much you need or want everything to be overhauled because, you know, it's not like, how do I put this? It's not like you can go and play the original version or this version, right?
True.
The original version, just you gotta have a copy sitting around and a PSP whose battery hasn't exploded, or emulators. But you know, like it's I don't mind them essentially keeping a lot of the design choices very similar because there are people out there who are really hardcore fans of the game, and especially considering that we're currently going through this really ambitious other remake project for 7 that's doing very different stuff. And a lot of people were like, you should have done something more faithful, right? I'm sure there's some people out there who are going, if there was one game you shouldn't have remade faithfully, it shouldn't have been Dirge. Sorry, Dirge either, but you know, it shouldn't have been Crisis. But you know, we've got I think there's probably at least that mentality of like, since we're doing this other big thing, let's just give people the game that they love in a slightly glammed up package of you know, the thing that they already like. And I don't mind if there's not. I'm not deeply invested in it in the first place. But I think they can keep a lot of that crap. But it's like, you know, listen, people like that crap, man. There's some people out there who are really attached to the fact that they can roll a slot machine and the boss just dies. Some people like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's no denying the success of the game, regardless of how like you and I may like personally feel about like stuff like the combat system or things like that. So I'm sure that there are people who would want probably a purist version of the game to play the game as it is, which is kind of like the obligation of a remaster, right? And while they can tweak and enhance certain things, you do still want a version of the game that is the game that you liked, right? Yeah. Because it would be like a lot of options, right?
You're looking at a lot of options, like you can turn off the slot machine in a menu or something, right? You know,
that would be based. That would be bad.
Yeah, I mean, they let you turn off attractions after they patched KH3, right? So
right,
maybe they do that.
That would make the game significantly better for me. But then though too, you would also have, and I guess this works for a remaster, right? Because like some remasters will even come with cheats, like especially for older games. So I guess I was gonna say it may not make like the ending land, but the only people who would be interested in turning the DMW off will probably be people who have played Crisis Core before and did not like it, right? And people who are experiencing it for the first time will probably want to keep it on, and wouldn't even like really see a point in fooling with the setting, maybe. So
yeah, people who haven't played the game before would go into the menu and see, I don't even know what this is, I'll leave it on. Yeah,
exactly, right? I seem to do less damage when I turn it off, so I'll leave it on. That's probably how, you know, a new person would think. I imagine. I'm not sure. Do you think it's gonna have like a new ending though that connects it to Remake?
I think it'd be the easiest thing in the world to do, like, you know, your Halo style legendary. You beat the game on of like you play on the hardest difficulty, and now there's actually a limit on that final fight where it's like the difficulties are really cranked up, so that instead of just it clocking out, you're supposed to die like properly. Your health is supposed to be drained. But if you beat it on the hardest difficulty, then it plays the FMV from the ending of 7, where the whispers that are surrounding the city, you know, dissipate. And he says, "Hey, Cloud, did you see that? Was that all of them?" You know, and then play. Honestly, it probably won't even be a new cutscene, because that trailer for Rebirth where the feather floats down and Zack and Cloud are walking towards the city, I'm willing to bet that's just gonna be like part of the opening FMV for Rebirth. So freaking they'll just staple that on as the legendary end for Crisis Core probably. But no, there will definitely be a play on the hardest. You can win the final fight and you can see get a little remake something. But I think that's gonna be it.
Right. That sounds really cool. I was thinking that they were just gonna staple it on there, but I do like the idea of you actually being able to win the fight, and then that actually is what triggers the ending, and not just say like, oh hey, we just give it to you as like a bonus. But
no, there's no way that it's gonna be like a menu thing. Just like, oh, you can go watch it after you beat the game. And they're definitely not gonna replace the ending. I've seen some people on the internet being like, oh, they're gonna ruin it by just making the ending like remake. They're not gonna do it. They're gonna have the original ending in the game, but you will be able to unlock an additional ending somehow.
Right.
I have enough confidence in them that they wouldn't make that totemic of a mistake. I mean, they have to know that they have to understand that the best part of Crisis Core is the ending. Like that's the part that everybody remembers, that everybody talks about. That's why they could cut to it in the ending of 7 and show it, and everybody would know. As long as, I mean, obviously not new players, but the people who know, right? They're not just gonna remove that. So it's gonna be fine.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The ending is the thing that people talk about. It's what makes them usually feel so emotionally drawn to the game. So I think that like removing it would be a bad idea. Do you think at the end title card where it says to be continued in Final Fantasy VII Remake, to be considered in Final Fantasy VII, they'll change it to Final Fantasy VII Remake?
They might do that. I mean, because it'd be easy enough thing, right? And I saw someone in chat earlier saying that they are changing the design of the Buster Sword to match the original / remake design instead of like the gold embossed hilt and the red handle, which I guess I didn't even pay that much attention. Was it changed in the FMVs too?
It was changed in the FMVs. Which is really weird, by the way, because
it means they have the files still.
Right. It means either they had the files or they meticulously doctored the FMV videos.
Every frame by frame, they overlaid a new Buster Sword.
Right, and we can't really tell yet until we like can see more of it. But I doubt that they still have the files, and I doubt that they re-rendered it. Because not only, I mean, even if they did still have the files, I think that it probably was using very dated CG software, right? Because we're talking about
2007,
right? Which means that the FMVs were made in like 2005 or 6, right? So we're talking about like 15 plus year old, 17, however many years year old like CG, right? Software. And I don't even know if they could get that thing to render. So I'm like wondering, like, did they actually go in frame by frame and doctor the Buster Sword, which would be insane,
what they did.
Right? Or they may have had like some type of like post editing tool that would allow them to like have like tracking and track the sword the whole way, and then paste like a new image on top of it. But the lighting really matches well. So I don't know. There's probably special effects teams that are able to to figure out like how exactly you would edit a video in post to be able to do that. With the idea of like an additional ending, it's going to be interesting because you're also going to have like CG that doesn't match the original game, so that's going to be kind of weird too. Michael Jason, thank you for the bits. He says, first ending will say to be continued in Final Fantasy VII, and second ending that you can unlock will say to be continued in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That makes a lot of sense to me.
That'd be a smart way to do it.
I think that's probably the best way to view it. Thank you for the contribution, Michael.
We discussed at some length last time that I really do feel that Remake, the original game, is designed to encourage you to go play the original. Which is part of why my whole comparison of like, I think that doing a slightly more faithful remaster of this makes sense compared to the like, I'm fine with the overhaul of 7 because original 7 is still acquirable easily. Very easy to acquire. And we talked a lot about how like I've seen a lot of people who have had more than enough opportunity to play original 7 over the course of the 25 years since it's released, who didn't until after they played the first remake, because it was kind of a, I've caught up on the currently released episodes of Game of Thrones. I'm gonna go read the books now, right? And so it would make sense to kind of still leave even Crisis Core of like now go play 7, because they very much want to funnel these new players to the original game.
Yeah. I'm gonna hit this last big one for me and chat. I want you to go ahead if there is anything that you want our thoughts on. So it can honestly just be a statement if you want to and give our thoughts, or if you have a question, go ahead and submit that now. This is always my favorite part. Please tag either me or Jacob in those comments, or highlight them, or both. It just makes it easier for me to find. So go ahead and submit your questions. It can be about Final Fantasy 16. It can be about Rebirth. It can be about anything you want it to be. With that said, let's talk about Rebirth itself. The Rebirth trailer didn't really show that much, right? We kind of saw what appears to be the calm flashback. We got a lot of dialogue that I think is misleading, personally. I don't think I don't think any of it in context is what we think it is.
Yes.
And we got some questions and some texts displayed on the screen. What is Sephiroth's in-game? What is fact? What is fiction? And we got some footage with Zack and Cloud seemingly walking into like Midgar, which is crazy. People have interpreted the statements from Nomura and co afterwards that it's going to be deviating far from the original, and Aerith also kind of made some meta statements, it feels like, during the actual thing that seems like maybe this is going to be something that deviates pretty far from what people know to be Final Fantasy VII. Do you share these sentiments, and where do you feel things are currently going?
So I talked about this a bit last time around, because there has been some conflicting statements. Like Kitase said after Original 7 came out, and they were able to discuss this stuff, he was like, you're still going to get the 7 experience that you know, there's just going to be some other stuff as well. And then honestly, you know what is a good point of comparison? Literally the last time that we were on here together, we talked about the trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4, and how the narrator says things like, if this is not the fate that you thought you desired, then go seek another fate, right?
Right.
And there were people who were interpreting that as like meta-textual about, if you didn't like Kingdom Hearts 3, then go play another game. If you're reading it that way, you ought seek some grass. So I don't know if you saw this. I always get her name wrong. Aitsukai Mochi on Twitter.
Yeah, Aitsukai Mochi. Yeah.
She did a little translation of the Japanese version, and the dialogue is very different in Japanese, which gives me the sense that, like you said, we're hearing it all completely out of context. And it's probably by this point, because the game's coming out in a little over a year and a half. The game's probably already, the English script is probably done. A lot of English dialogue's probably been recorded. And with that in mind, we're probably hearing sentences that like, they've been localized slightly differently, because in their original context where they're supposed to be in the game, it still the context still makes sense. Right. But now we're hearing it chopped up in a way. They're just stealing the equivalent line from the English script, and it's not working quite the same. Because if I can find it really fast, and I can make sure I'm getting it right.
Oh, please, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, give me un momento. There was because Aerith's dialogue at the beginning in particular is very different.
Yeah, that was the part that stood out to me.
Yeah. So in English, she says something to the effect of like, the past is set in stone, we can't change it. So focus on the future, not the past, right? In Japanese, according to Audrey, says, sadness and anger are what make us strong, but it will also change us. Don't think about the past, but the future instead. So it seems between those two, it seems like the overall point of the line is simply, what's done is done. Things that have occurred in the past, they can have an impact on you, but you can't linger on them for too long. You have to decide what you're going to do in the future. So I don't think that, especially because in Japanese it can't be read that way. I don't think that. Oh, we
just had someone give 25 subs.
Oh wow!
Wow, Jonah Green. thank you so much. I did not mean to cut you off, man. Wow, thank you so much for the 25 subs. We appreciate you a lot. Wow, thank you. Please continue, Jacob.
No problem. I was just gonna say, like, especially looking at the Japanese, I can't interpret this as a deliberate, like, hey, hey, listen, we're gonna change everything, or like, hey, are you salty about how this went down? Well, too bad. So once again, I think that's some people taking things a little bit too personally when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Right.
But the other one, and then another good example of this is the dialogue, which some people are attributing to Aerith, but it's actually Tifa. If you listen to the dialogue. Cloud says something to the effect of, like, I saw you lying there on the ground and I thought that it was too late, right? I thought I was too late to help you. And then Tifa says in English, like, what are you implying? That I wasn't really there? That I'm some kind of imposter, right? Which is like, okay, huh? In Japanese, she says, so are you doubting me? You're implying as if somebody else was there instead. I'm sure that in the scene, Cloud is then immediately gonna go, no, I don't think you actually died. I'm saying that I, for a moment, thought you were dead. And then the scene's gonna move on. And that line that Tifa says is gonna be totally inconsequential. But I've talked a lot in my playthroughs of Kingdom Hearts, particularly in Kingdom Hearts 2. This is very prevalent. Lines that are in the script exclusively so that they could be in trailers to be like, ooh, what's going on? Because there was like one of the FMVs, like the unlockable secret movie for KH1 has like all these lines of dialogue that fly across the screen, and they don't make any sense, right? They're all these crazy things that are being said. And you're like, what are these? What's going on? These things don't make any sense. And then you find out that they were just random phrases that Nomura came up with for that trailer. And then he said, and now Nojima, you figure out too. And there's stuff like that a little bit, like in Dream Drop Distance and Kingdom Hearts 3 as well, where there's like, I'm gonna take this line that sounds a lot more mysterious and crazy than it actually is, and I'm gonna put it in the trailer just to really mess with people. And because people, especially folks like you, I'm a little less than some other people out there, but a lot of people are freaked out about how different this game is gonna be. I definitely think this trailer being like, expect the unexpected, is Tifa a clone, is just a head fake.
Right. I do not think Tifa will be a clone, for clarification.
Yeah, no, I didn't think you thought that. I'm just saying.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't think you thought that at all. I'm saying that this trailer, stuff like that is just there to mess with people.
Oh, okay.
In my personal opinion.
For sure. So my thoughts on it didn't really show much. I do think that it is kind of bracing us, like if not in like the trailer, some of the statements that Nomura and the team made afterwards do seem to me seem to imply that things are not quite going to be what we think they're going to be. If that makes sense.
I mean, I totally expect wacky, wild stuff to happen. Yeah. I just like somebody in chat earlier asked for like percentage. I think some people are thinking like 60% is going to be different. I'm thinking like 30. It's kind of my sense. I don't know.
I think that like my take is actually
the final game is going to be 50%.
Yeah, I think that like, so my take on it is that like I don't even think that like the discussion on like percentage difference will even necessarily make sense when we play part 2. If that even makes sense.
It's going to be so interwoven.
It's going to be so interwoven that like the same thing will happen, but the context will be different. So is it like percentage wise, how do you divide that out, right? But because there's no way to come to the same conclusion, because it's like this thing is happening, but it's happening for a completely different reason than it happened, or a completely different context. So I don't even think we'll be saying, oh, is this percent different or that percent different? Like, you know, like how would you say the Evangelion movies are different after a certain point, right? It just kind of like shoots off into like its own thing. And I do think that the iconic moments will still be there, because I think that I don't think that they're going to get rid of them, and I think that they still want to tell like the same character backstories. Like they're not going to be like, You know, they're not gonna say like, oh well, you know, we don't have time for Nanaki and Cosmo Canyon, so we're just not gonna do Seto's backstory or anything like that. I don't think anything like that is gonna happen. I think that stuff will be the most faithful aspect actually of the whole game. Like I think that like when we are having discussions about like where it stayed faithful and where it didn't, I think that the character backstories are gonna be for the most part the most purist, so to speak.
New Piece is the only one that I can foresee being changed in a significant way, because it already has been, but it makes sense with the new background of the relations with Wutai.
Right, and it's hard to even like look at that and say that like Yuffie's backstory maybe isn't faithful there. It just seems more like it's actually fleshed out compared to what it was. So I really, you know, I don't feel. And this is kind of how I felt going into it too. I don't really have like a negative or positive sort of take on Rebirth so far. I think that they just didn't show enough to like really make me feel one way or another, right? Because here is the thing, right? For all the changes that we've been talking about, I mean, there have been changes, right? So don't get me wrong. But like the real major changes, the stuff that's very much like, oh, that's a big change. Oh, we're in a completely different story yet. That's all just been like, kind of like looming over our heads. But we haven't actually come face to face with it, right? So I am thinking that we are going to have like playable Zack, and I do think that Zack is going to be in our timeline. I don't think it's going to be separate. A lot of people think it's going to be separate. I just can't see it, because I think like if it is like a completely separate timeline and they're never together, I don't see how you can tell a cohesive story like that.
I still think they're going to be in separate timelines. I have some ideas about how they might handle that, but I'm hesitant to call any shots with this game, because I am very much you and I we have very different philosophy. You just come. I mean, we both like 7 Remake, but we have very different like philosophical outlooks on the entire like project. But I'm very much just kind of like I'm not gonna say like, oh, whatever they do, I'll like it, because that's not necessarily the case. I'm sure they could absolutely do some stuff that I would hate. But I'm like, I have a decent amount of confidence that like I think I'll probably be okay with it. But the only thing I feel confident predicting is I have one main thing. Somebody I guess kind of asked this in chat a second ago. But what plot point would you want to see expanded? I kind of talked about this last time, how I really like the entire Wutai's situation has been changed so much.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite change.
Because after you leave Midgard, the Shinra characters stop mattering. You know, they introduce Rufus, but then he stops mattering. So it's like giving this like building up to there's going to be another war would be really interesting. And something I was talking with my friend and co-host on YouTube, Joey, the other day. We were talking a bit about this and what we think could happen with the next game. And I guess, honestly, the biggest news for me out of this whole thing, since I didn't mention this, was that it's locked in 3 parts.
That was the best news. The best news.
I felt like I always felt like that was the right number, because 2 was not enough for what they were proposing they were going to do, and 4 was too many. Like 4 is asking far too much and asking people to wait too long. But looking at that, I'm hopeful that to me the only logical stopping points for a part 2, the only like logical cliffhanger ending, is either we talked about this last time a bit, the Temple of the Ancients or the first trip up to the North Crater. And again, I was talking with my friend Joey. I'm going to bite around spoilers just in case. I think most people who are here probably they know, but just in case. I was talking with my friend Joey, who did not experience the game until I played it with him on our channel a number of years ago. And he was talking about, like, for me, the North Crater thing and weapons is the better cliffhanger. And Meteor in the Sky is the better cliffhanger than Temple of the Ancients. Because everybody kind of knows the Temple of the Ancients one, and you're like, okay, that happened, that's sad. But like, if it's like, our main character is, I don't know what's going on anymore. Some of our heroes are captured, and this really bad stuff is happening. That's a great lead into part 3. But my concern was always that's a lot of environments to have to make for one video game. Now, probably a lot of them will be relatively simple. Like, I mean, they blew up Midgar big for part 1. And I would guess that in order to get us through all these locations in part 2, like Costa del Sol is going to be about the size that it probably was in the original game, for example. Cosmo Canyon's probably going to be about the size that it was in the original game.
Right.
Or else I just don't see them covering that much ground. But the main thing I was thinking about was, this gives us a bit of an advantage with part 3. Because realistically, after you get to North Crater, there's not a ton of new locations in the original game. There's, I always forget the name of it, but there's like that kind of jungle town where you find Cloud after he kind of gets separated from the rest of the group.
Yeah, Medeal.
Yes, thank you. And like you airdrop into Midgar at that one point. There you run through a couple of new rooms, but like other than the final dungeon and a couple of secret areas, there's not a location once you're in that back part. But there is a ton of content because you're just going back to old locations. I think that one thing they could do to save themselves a bit of money in the second game, and also to really mix up the story and to give us something really exciting in the third part, is I don't think we're going to go to Wutai in part 2. Because I think the Yuffie side quest is completely scrambled in this new context, right?
Right.
I think that part 3 is going to reuse a lot of locations from part 2, and a lot of the money of part 3 is going to go into all-out war in Wutai. And that's going to be a major element of the plot that's happening in part. That's the only prediction I feel confident is going to happen with. I think that in part 2 we're going to see all these dominoes building up, and like conflict is going to be breaking out just as the go downing happens at North Crater, and that's going to be part of the cliffhanger leading into part 3. And there's going to be a pretty big chunk of it. Of part 3 is going to be this war happening in Wutai. That'd be my guess. That's the only real prediction I have for these games right now, because we don't have enough information for me to do much.
No, that sounds great. And I think that you can use part 2, honestly, to kind of continue to build up from like Yuffie's perspective on Wutai, right? Because we haven't really gotten to know too much about her perspective yet in the context of Remake. So I think that they should almost kind of like flip the perspective, because we saw Shinra. I know what Shinra's planning with Wutai and how they feel about Wutai. So I think part 2 can focus on how Yuffie kind of feels about Wutai, and then part 3 is where that you can flick the domino and let everything go down there, and that would be built up really well at that point, so that whatever happens feels really strong at that point. So that would also be a good way in a game it's harder to integrate secret bosses. Right. We don't know for sure what the format's going to be yet, but like let's say we take Ruby Weapon or one of the other optional ones, and it shows up in the middle of a big battle, and that's how we get it in fights or whatever. Oh, you kind of cut out there a little bit. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah. I don't know. I was saying, picture, for example, we got like the optional fights, like Ruby Weapon, or what's the underwater one? The name of it, I forget. The green guy. Green boy. Emerald, right? That's Emerald. Yeah, Emerald. I couldn't come to my. I'm saying, like, consider that we don't know for sure what the format of these games going forward is going to be, but it might be a little bit harder to incorporate like optional hidden bosses, because the game's probably going to be structured a bit differently. So I was like, let's say that a big war is happening in Wutai, and now we make an iconic enemy like Ruby Weapon mandatory content because it shows up in Wutai or something, right? As a new element of just stuff like that. That could be interesting. From a game design perspective, Emerald Weapon is too expensive to not be mandatory. Yeah, it's gonna be mandatory. It's not gonna be in the game. It's too expensive to be an optional boss now, so it's gonna be mandatory. Emerald Weapon is probably gonna be, you don't have a normal fight with it. You fight it like in a submarine. Like it's like a mini game where you shoot torpedoes at it or something. Have you seen the Sapphire Weapon fight in Final Fantasy XIV? Hold on. Is that the one that you fight like on top of an airship? It's the one where no, that's Diamond Weapon. The Sapphire Weapon one is where you're like or like a mech, or like you get inside of a mech. I just googled it. I haven't seen this one. Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. So you're fighting Sapphire Weapon inside of a mech. I feel like that would be a cool thing to do in Remake.
Yeah, that could be good. Make it kind of a MGS4 Moses, where our fates were born, and we're thin snake fight. Yeah, that could be good. I'd like that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, for sure.
You gotta fight it inside the Proud Claw.
Yeah.
You don't blow it up. You hijack it, and you gotta fight it off.
I like it. I do. All right, let's go through some of these user questions. I may at some point blip out because my bladder is like. So if I do, you can keep going and answering your half of the question. If I do, oh man, I think you have a lot to say on this first one here, and that is comes from Kingdom Trigger. Kingdom Trigger asks, "What do you think is the future of proprietary engines with Square Enix? Luminous Studios is making Forspoken with their engine, and FF16 seems proprietary as well." So I'll answer my part, and then I'll let you answer.
Go ahead. You probably know more about the engine situation on 16 than I do, so actually I'll let you talk about that first. Yeah.
So I'm probably gonna cut out to the bathroom at that point. With Final Fantasy 16 and like a lot of their games where they're trying to make their own proprietary engines, a lot of companies like to use proprietary engines because you don't have to pay any royalties, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can get like a stable proprietary engine going, it's actually a lot more profitable. So that's kind of like the big driving force behind that. And then also Japanese companies, they like to use their own proprietary stuff. They like stuff that's in-house that they've made. They've had a lot of trouble though using these proprietary engines, and I think that's why they've had a lot more luck with games like Remake and Dragon Quest XI, where they start using Unreal Engine and they're able to do it, right? So in chat says, look at the success of Capcom's having with RE Engine, right? Yeah, they have their own proprietary engine that they're able to use, and that's a lot more profitable than what Square's doing with Unreal Engine, because they don't have to pay any royalties, right? Like you have to pay like a 5% royalty. It may be different with actual companies, but at least with the way it works for indies, I think it's the same license across the board, but like it's like a 5% royalty to Unreal Engine that you have to pay. This is also why they've been big on Epic Games exclusives, because with Epic Games, they don't have to pay that royalty whenever they sell things through the Epic Games Store. They can just skip over that altogether. Proprietary engines make things more profitable. I think mainline Final Fantasy titles for the foreseeable future are always going to use a proprietary engine, because when it comes to actually selling those titles, they're going to make more, and those titles sell millions of units. I don't think they had that luxury with Final Fantasy VII Remake, because the multi-game structure, and if they were to work on their own technology for that, that could just be like oh my god, it could take them decades, like, you know, just going between their own technology and updating their own technology. And so using a established engine for something like that makes sense, but I can totally see why they would use it for their own stuff. But I think they'll keep trying to make their own technology work for sure. I'm gonna let you answer your take on that while I go to the bathroom real quick.
Alrighty. So I'm gonna make a lot of suppositions here about people I don't know and internal situations at companies that I don't know anything about. So understand some of this is like, hey, this is what appears to be happening, and some of this is what I'm guessing is happening. Let's rewind the clock a bit back to 2013 timing, thereabouts, where Final Fantasy Versus 13 became 15. KH3 was announced. And then a little while later, 2015, Final Fantasy VII Remake was the first year of development on Kingdom Hearts 3 was done on Luminous Engine. Some of you guys may or may not remember this. But after a year or so, they said we're scrapping our work that we've done in Luminous, and we are switching over to Unreal 4. Now, background stuff, a lot of you guys probably know that the Square Enix Crystal Tools engine was used back in the day in the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 era. And there was a lot of tension over how many different projects were being made with it at once, because FF13, FF Versus 13, and FF14 were all using it I think Final Fantasy, or rather Dragon Quest 10, 9, one of them wound up using it. But the point is, like, one of the difficulties of the Crystal Tools engine was they were developing so many different things for it at once that a bunch of projects got stalled out. Original 1.014 was a complete disaster, and Versus 13 never came out, and largely it was because of difficulties they had with it. So my guess would be, for example, particularly with Tetsuya Nomura, when Square said, okay, we're making Luminous engine and we're going to make 16 with it. Initially, Kingdom Hearts 3 was being developed on that. And as far as we know, 7 Remake was always in Unreal. It feels very much like Tetsuya Nomura said, guys, I shouldn't say Tetsuya Nomura himself, but I have to imagine he has strong feelings about this, since he got mega cucked for like 8 years because of engine difficulties and also the PlayStation 3, but that's another matter entirely. I suspect that somewhere internally somebody had to say, guys, we cannot make the same mistake we made last generation and try to make all these tentpole games using the same engine. Even if we want to use Luminous long term on everything, we cannot possibly do it right now. We have to get it stable and finished first and ship something first. Then maybe we can expand its use. So KH3 and FF7 Remake moved over to Unreal. Since Unreal is since FF7 is an ongoing series, like directly, it's going to stay on the same engine, obviously. Kingdom Hearts 3, similarly, probably going to stay on the same engine because it's that team, and they're probably going to be reusing some assets between 3 and 4 and onward. Like, I'm pretty sure the models for Donald and Goofy we saw in that trailer were like exactly the same. At least they look that way to me. Though I can't claim to have scrutinized them like down to the polygon. So then this takes me to, okay, it took them how long since they started developing Luminous? Like what, 2012? All the way up until 2016 to ship a game, right? And soon they will ship their second game. In 2022, 10 years after development on the Luminous engine started, they will ship the second Luminous engine game. I think that these sales numbers on Forspoken are going to be an extremely heavy determining factor on whether or not proprietary engines continue to be a thing at Square. Because like you were saying a second ago, there are advantages financially to using an internal engine, but there are also some technical advantages. Like the RE engine is a really good example of an engine that was developed specifically to do the things that Capcom needed it to do. It was like a lot of its stuff that it's so famous for is the fact that it can have bodies fragment and fall apart and rot away and tear in the way that they do Zombie 3. And a lot of the way that they get really good looking high fidelity character for their film performance level, acting in the RE games and in DMC5. But then you look at an alternative situation like, say, EA's Frostbite engine, which was designed it's basically the Battlefield engine. It was just designed for first-person shooters, more or less. But then EA said, well, it's cheaper if we use our own thing, so everybody's... But EA's developers make a lot of different types of games. And a lot of stuff that... Frostbite Omega lol, says chat. Frostbite has kneecapped a bunch of stuff that BioWare has worked on, a bunch of other things. As far as I know, Respawn has been the only company that said, no, F that, we're not doing it. Because a lot of people don't know this. Both of the Titanfall games are running on a heavily modified custom version of the Source engine.
What?
Yes. Titanfall 2 was running on Source.
God.
I believe that Jedi Fallen Order was an Unreal, though.
Right.
That was another Respawn game. After Titanfall, they said we're not doing that, unfortunately. And never again. Omega's sad. But so like you look at it from that perspective and you say, okay, it could be beneficial to be able to develop an engine that can do the specific things we need to do, but it can also be too hyper specific and limit things. I think that putting KH3 and FF7 Remake on Unreal was at a like board level, was a going, we don't want to, but we have to. It's the only option. We can't repeat, we have to. But I also bet at that same board meeting where they said, we've got it, they said, okay, well, so for KH and for the rest of the 7 Remake, but after that, back to our own engine, right? Here's the thing. Now KH3 and FF7 Remake are making Omega dollars. And while 15 did make a lot of money, I think even internally they know the reception to that was a little bit was tepid in some areas. Sorry, a bit of hair blew into my face there. I'm willing to bet that if is my audio okay? Somebody in chat said I'm clipping out a little bit.
It has clipped out a little bit, but I think it's been manageable. I don't know if there's anything you can.
I don't know about that. Sorry, folks. But what I was if it keeps being bad, I'll switch to another microphone or something.
Yeah, it's doable. It's doable.
Okay.
If
I checked my lav mics. The battery's still fine. I'm only wearing a lav because I had my whole planned. But I can switch to another mic if we need to, especially since we're wrapping.
Yeah.
But no, I think that if Forspoken does really well, it's like, okay, cool, great. We'll keep investing all this money into this development of this engine, right? I think if Forspoken crashes and burns, they might like try one more time. But at this point, like there may, again, like I said, there's so much there. It's hard to argue with the dollar sign.
Yeah.
At some point, and they've been able to get these other games out relatively fast, and if nothing else, 7 and Cage 3 were both much more stable games than Final Fantasy 15. In terms of the way they actually ran. Remains to be seen how Forspoken performs. I really think that the future of the proprietary Square engine is going to come down in a major way to Forspoken sales numbers. But that was a lot of work. Stop, and I'm going to let you start answering the next question. Go ahead and mute me for a second. I'll swap mic.
From Lumberjack Penguin, which do you think will be bigger hit for Square Enix? Final Fantasy 16 or Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth? I've been thinking about this for a while now, because let's be honest, the hype right now is mostly with Rebirth. And the reason it is because it's Final Fantasy 7. It is an ongoing saga. The first part, the things we know, things that are safe. It has been well received. First part of Remake did really well. I think the Metacritic score for like Integrate is something like 88 or something like that. Really high. A score that high hasn't been seen by the single player series in a really long time. If you don't include Final Fantasy 14, which has had some expansions that go into the negatives. But aside from that, we haven't had too much of the single player games had like much critical success, right? So I think the hype is mostly in Rebirth's favor, especially with everyone wanting to know where this story is going. Now that being said, I think that you look at the success of Final Fantasy 15, which sold 10 million units, third highest selling single player Final Fantasy game of all time. And 15 really moved a lot of units. We still don't know where Final Fantasy VII Remake sales are. Now, there's an argument that is often made with this too, that that Final Fantasy 15 was multi-platform, and perhaps that's kind of the reason that it sold so much significantly more, is that it was on Xbox. When you actually do the numbers, and I actually went back and did these numbers, when Remake launched, there were actually more PS4s than there were PS4s and Xboxes combined when Final Fantasy 15 launched. So Final Fantasy 15, that's all to say that Final Fantasy 15 was like very much a juggernaut in sales. And it didn't come to PC until a year later, much like Final Fantasy VII Remake did. So I don't know what it was about 15, whether it was the open world, whether it was action combat, but it struck.
Marketing.
Yeah, it was marketed really well, right? Like, I don't think a Square Enix game has been marketed as well as Final Fantasy 15 since the first FF7, like the original FF7.
I could debate on well, but I can't deny the amount of money they spent shoving it in people's faces.
Yeah. Yeah, 15 was marketed like crazy. The movie, the anime, all the stuff they did to put out on it
had the treatment. It had treatment exceeding what like a Call of Duty would have received 10 years ago at the height of Call of Duty's sales figures, because they were like, we needed to sell this well.
Yeah. So who knows how, when you go dollar by dollar, right, and see how that works, because you could maybe look into it all and say, oh, well, 7R actually ended up way more profitable because they didn't spend that much money on all of the thing. Someone says you could turn your audio up a little bit more. because they didn't spend as much money on that marketing. It gets really hard to say, and we'll never know those internal numbers. And they don't seem to want to update us on where Final Fantasy VII Remake is sales-wise. If I were to take a guess, I would say Part 1 is probably at like 6.5 million to maybe 7 by now. But it's just so hard to tell. We really, really, really just don't know.
Sounds like a fine figure to me.
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yeah. So Final Fantasy 16 doesn't have the massive momentum behind it that, say, Remake does, but I think that, like, for the mainline numbered entries, as observed by Final Fantasy 15, that it is probable to me that Final Fantasy 16 could be a huge seller in the long term. I really don't know. I'm not convinced either way that one of these games will necessarily BTFO each other on sales, because it seems like they're both positioned really well. And I think that 16 is really going to blow up mainstream. Someone said, I guess it's around 10 million by now. If it was at a staggering number like 10 million, they'd
have told us. They would be bragging about it every minute of every day.
Yeah, because 15, they bragged about 15 hitting 10 million, and it took how many years for it to do it, right? Over like a long slow burn, right? So if it had already hit that number, then they would be posting that everywhere, because investors would be like, they'd be all over that. They love that. So what are your thoughts on it, man?
I have very little to add to other than what you just said. The main thing I'm going to say is, like, it's hard to judge the hype for a game like Final Fantasy 16 that's literally only had 2 trailers so far. So we've got, like, or rather I should say, it's hard to guess what that's going to look like when the game comes out. I mean, we got a year running up to this thing to get people excited, and all it really takes is, like, they put out, let's say, a really, really good demo like May of next year, and a bunch of streamers play it. I mean, that's like no joke. That's a big deal. That's stuff. We got people have a very firm grip on what 7 Remake Part 2 is going to be, because they played Part 1. You and I are sitting here, and I think we've probably scrutinized these trailers more than most people, and we have lots of questions about what 16 is going to be. They got a year to tell us what it is, and that's going to determine how excited people are.
Right, exactly. Whereas, like, with Rebirth, we already know what it is. And not just in the fact that we already know from Part 1, people are already intimately familiarized with Final Fantasy VII's characters. So, I mean, think about it, right? Like, 16's Dominance trailer showed off a lot more compared to Rebirth's teaser, which really just showed, like, Cloud walking, right? If you were to be objective about it and to compare the two trailers, you'd have to be biased to say that, the showing of Rebirth was
information from the 7-1 than
right.
16.
But the reason that Rebirth has more hype out around it for the moment is because you just know what it is. Like, you don't have to have any additional information or explanation on it. Like, your brain already has calibrated.
We were literally talking earlier about how, like, we've heard Clive say 2 lines of dialogue versus like, I know who Cloud is. I know that guy. I watched a movie about him a few years ago.
Yeah, been with him for 25 years. So, as we get more information on 16, I think it will be more clear to actually be like, oh, I think this one might blow up more than this one. Because I think that 16 has, like, insane mainstream appeal. I think you're gonna be able to show this to people who don't play JRPGs and don't care about them whatsoever, and they're gonna be like, that is so cool.
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine just a couple days ago who is like, I have touched anime occasionally, and I watched a couple that I kind of like, but no thanks. And, like, this is a person who's played 7 Remake and 7, and, like, a handful of other Final Fantasy games, but not that much. And I was like, hey, so they're recording the script in English first. You know what I mean? Like, even just that.
Yeah.
The base level of I turn on Final Fantasy VII Remake and I hear, that's enough to make some people go, oh, I can't do this. And that's not going to be, that's just not going to happen in this, probably.
Right.
It's not going to exist. Even that is going to make this so much more like eminently mainstream appealing. Because think about how well 15 did, right? And also think about how every single person on every corner of the internet was like, why am I playing as the Backstreet Boys? Why do they talk like that? I mean, like, it's cute and I like them and it's fun, but why do they talk like that? I think I'm saying, like, on one hand, these characters are all going to be like, forsooth, aught is amiss. I think people are going to be able to, like, they're gonna get it. And I think that's going to be something where, like, a normie friend who's like, I can't do the anime, I can't do the hair, I can't do the spiky hair or whatever. I think I could take them a 16 and they would go like, yes, very interesting. Yes, a real video game for real gamers, which is not necessarily fair, but I agree. I think that this has huge mainstream hit potential.
Right. So my brother, this is actually ironic. People lose their mind over this because it's so funny. Because, like, I'm a JRPG guy, right? And then I have a brother, and he's almost purely a Western RPG guy. He does not play JRPGs. And he grew up and he read comics and graphic novels, and I watched, like, anime and read manga. and the only Final
Dark is reached, two sides of the same coin.
And the only Final Fantasy that has ever really interested him, that he was, like, more enthusiastic about than me, was Final Fantasy 12.
Yeah.
And I think that this game
has the best localization of any of them by a country mile.
Yeah, aside from maybe 14. Yeah, those two are those two are the best.
I know you don't like when people say 14 doesn't count. I'm going to say in this particular realm, 14 does get to cheat a bit because it doesn't have to worry about cutscene timing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's in one area the localization has there. It doesn't have to try and match up with the animation from the Japanese. But no, yes, 14's localization is also phenomenal. Absolutely cracked. I'm very glad to hear that Koji Fox is doing 16.
He's so great.
Yeah.
You watch interviews with him. He's just like, he's a great guy. He's so cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think that people who don't like JRPGs will gravitate to 16, and people who do like JRPGs will play 16. And I just don't know whether Rebirth or 16 are going to be the bigger hit. It's just too early to tell. Another question from Ron Turd Sausage Farter. Awesome name. Do you think the overview shot with Cloud and Sephiroth walking through Mount Evil in the trailers is supposed to imply it's going to be more open?
I think that big valley is still going to be a hallway. It's just going to be wide linear. I mean, at least that. But here's the thing, right? That shot in particular, that's from the Nibelheim flashback, so that can't be an open world segment. That's the two of them walking to one location in a very contained part of the story. I think the main thing that's worth noting about that is that in both cuts, Cloud's objective marker is like 1,000 meters away or whatever up in the top, which, if nothing else, says there are going to be big stretches of the game where, like, you're not going to be like hitting cutscenes and hitting objectives constantly. You are going to have like large areas you have to walk through, but it's not necessarily going to be a big open world, I don't think. I don't know. That's one thing that they could have shown, but they did. Much like with FF16, we still have yet to understand exactly how this game's going to be structured.
I completely agree. We got one from Jonah Green 89. Night Sky Prince, yo man, always deeply enjoying the convo. Would love to know yours and Jacob's opinion on how much the team can streamline or move Part 3 in Rebirth, assuming the story follows the same course of events. For instance, can Wutai be skipped and pushed into the last game in a bid to summon Leviathan to fight the big weapons? Actually, I think we talked on this earlier.
We're kind of playing on the same. We're playing the same ball game there earlier. We're kind of talking about that.
Or can we go to the Northern Crater in the finale, but not snowboard down the mountain? Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Some stuff is definitely going to get filed out in Part 2. I think that it would be very easy to, after Temple of the Ancients, especially to maintain tone, you then montage the party somberly climbing the mountain, right? Like, you skip past Icicle Inn until Part 3. You do a montage, like after the go downing at the Temple of the Ancients, then there's a montage and like one last dungeon before then you have the go downing in the North Crater. There's also just other weird like stuff you can file off and save time, like the fossil hunt you have to do to get through the frozen forest. I seriously doubt that's still gonna happen. We have to do like the seismic charges to like find where stuff is buried at the dig site, and also like even stuff like, there's that part where the game goes, you have to get out of Rocket Town, and you're like, now what? And the game's like,
Yeah.
You have to find like one random house that a dude is sitting in that says, "Yeah, I sold the rock to Dio," right? That's gonna become much more either A, just new plot stuff is gonna happen entirely, which is probably more likely, or B, you're gonna go straight back to the gold saucer because you're gonna overhear something that Rufus says, or whatever. Like stuff like that's gonna get filed down in part 2. I think is a pretty easy bet.
This is actually...
We will still snowboard in part 3. It just won't be after the Temple of the Ancients. It'll be in part 3. I don't know the context, but Roche will be there. Roche will appear on a snowmobile, and you will have to outpace him on your snowboard.
Hey, and this is like my question. Actually, we'll just deviate real quick. But
Sure.
do you think they'll really add? Because I think there's like 4 playable characters left. There's Ketchi. There's, obviously Red 13 obviously is there. So Red 13, Ketchi, Yuffie has to be added, Vincent, and then Sid. So there's 4 playable characters already technically from the original game. You could probably go ahead and add Yuffie because they're only tweaking probably animations and stuff. She's mostly going to be the same. So they have 5.
But that'll be it, yeah.
Right. So they have 5 playable characters. Maybe Red 13's already there. So I guess all they have to add is like maybe 3 playable characters. Do you think anyone will be left out for like part 3? Because I think marketing wise, would it not be better, I guess, to leave a character out for?
If anybody, it would be. If anybody, it would be Vincent. That's the only option. Like, 'cause
Right.
you could hypothetically do similarly to Yuffie. You could do after part 2 a flashback to his career as a Turk DLC, right? To get us the Lucrezia and Hojo backstory, and it ends with him going on the coffin, and then he appears in part 3. That's the only conceivable cut that they could make, I think.
Right.
I know they could cut Sid, but I don't see why they would. Vincent would make the most sense to hold off until the final part.
Right.
That's all I got to say on that.
Right. Because then we also have playable Zack too. More than likely.
Probably.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Zach is gonna he's just gonna play like Cloud.
Right. So you think they'll just copy and paste animations?
It's not gonna be literally copy pasted, but the play style and like game balance, like his animations will be different, but the number, the hood, exactly the same.
Oh, you kind of cut out there. Do you want to say that again?
I was saying that maybe it's my internet connection, not microphones. I was saying that they met like Zach's animation. And my thought process would be Zach's animations would be different, but the numbers game, like the numbers under the hood of what's actually happening, would be exactly the same.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
New character and rebalancing him. His animations would be slightly different from Cloud's, but he'd do about the same stuff. Would be my guess.
That sounds reasonable.
That's how I would handle it, at least.
Between Dragon Quest XII, Cage 4, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI, and Final Fantasy XIV, including the smaller scale titles from SE, would you say this is the best output level from Square Enix since the PS2 era? This comes from Kingdom Trigger. Yeah.
Yeah. It's easy to forget there were a lot of smaller games slipping out in the, PS3 era and whatnot, like just people forget about. But no, compared to the PS2 insane workhouse their output right now is nuts. There's so much stuff in the pipeline right now that's like not little small cheap spin-offs, like big projects.
Yeah.
And Dragon Quest XII is a total unknown factor since they said it's going to be an action game. And all we've seen is a logo, right? Like that's going to be who even knows what that's going to look like, but that's probably going to be one of the most ambitious things Enix has done in quite some time because they're completely changing their design philosophy that hasn't been altered since the 80s.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen there?
That is kind of a big question with Dragon Quest XII. Yeah, this is definitely the most output that we've gotten from Square Enix in like a decade or even two, honestly.
Your whole Silver Age terminology is makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think so too, because I don't think they're quite at the consistency level of Golden Age, but I think that they are getting there. I think that it is. There are enough quality titles being put out that I can be reasonably excited for Square Enix stuff without feeling like a fool, right? Like if you asked me like PS3 era, early PS4 era, I was just like, man, being excited for Square stuff, it's gonna take forever, it's gonna come out, it might be disappointing. Or in like, you know, the case of like Versus, and the sentiment on that for the longest time was just like, or it just may never come out, right? Or you just may never hear about it ever again, right? So I would say that Square is in a really good position, and you can also like really see that since they've sold off their Western studios, that this is how they're going to make money. They are going to sell Japanese games again, and they have to dedicate all their time and resources to making Japanese games, which as a JRPG fan is a good thing, I think.
Some people in chat are saying they haven't confirmed Dragon Quest 12 as an action game, just as they said that the combat is going to be really overhauled. Okay, those interviews were like a year ago. I don't remember all the details.
Right. They kind of implied that maybe that was going to be a thing.
Okay, got it.
But it hasn't been explicitly said, so who knows? Sly Mimo asks, thoughts on MJ Gallagher's theory that Cloud speaking at the end of the trailer is a callback / revision to the Nibelheim reveal at the Northern Crater You Were Here 5 years ago. I feel like I would need to hear that theory in context.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Like in full. I didn't get to watch the Still Team 7 the other day in full yet, so I had to flip out. So I don't have like a great answer for that one, unfortunately.
I'm afraid I got nothing there either.
But I guess I'm curious.
My only thoughts on that line in general is that probably what's going to happen is while Cloud isn't going to, he's still going to have his, he's still going to have the Nibelheim flashback is going to go the way that we all know it went. But he's going to at some point, probably in Gongaga, be like, wait a second. I knew a Zack. Why did I not remember a Zack? And where the heck did he go? This is odd, right? That's probably what that is. It's going to be a scene where he like, you'll recall when Aerith said his name in part 1, when Aerith said Zack, Cloud went, I need Advil. There's going to be like, they're going to go see his parents in Gongaga, and they're going to say Zack's name, and it's going to not bother him, or like it's going to hit him, but then it's going to fade away, and then he's going to go, wait, hold on a second, I knew a guy named. That's what that line is. Again, more like out of context things snatched from somewhere in the script to put in the trailer to screw with people. I don't know, but the theory that the other guy was talking about, I don't know. I'm not familiar.
Yeah. Kimosabe1 asks, whatever happened to Matsuno? All these games inspired by his older games, but other than writing some stuff for 14, he hasn't really done anything of note lately.
Well, he basically had a nervous breakdown during the development of Final Fantasy 12. And he went off and started a new company where he's like, I just write stuff. I write stories for games. You can hire me to be a screenwriter. Basically the only thing he's done for Square was the Raid series for 14, but I believe he has done a little bit of writing on some other stuff. And I assume he's probably been consistently called in for like even just consulting stuff on like the Tactics Ogre, various remakes and stuff that have happened over the last 10 years. But no, he's a little bit kind of disappeared, but it seems like my guess would be from what I've read, he got uncomfortable with the scale of productions that he was working on and the internal pressure. Because it certainly seems like on like Tactics and Vagrant Story, he kind of got to do whatever he wanted. But when he was doing 12, that was when like kind of the management switched out. Sakaguchi was on the way out or gone by the time that game was released. And then he had executives needling him about, the main character shouldn't be a 40-year-old dude. It should be a 17-year-old to hit the right demos that we need, right? And I think among other things, also along with the fact that Final Fantasy 12 was ludicrously ambitious. Maybe he just doesn't, I don't know, maybe he just doesn't really want to be in that role in the industry anymore. Someone in chat says he's on Twitter, which I didn't even know. So
yeah, he is. He tweets quite frequently. Yeah.
I don't know what he's doing.
Him and Sakaguchi play FF14 together.
How is that so?
Yeah, they in fact they actually streamed it once. Of course, it was all in Japanese,
I
but
didn't
like,
know that. That's awesome.
yeah, like they streamed a couple of times together with him and Matsuno running content together. It was great.
I'd say I have to check that out, but I don't speak Japanese, so I wouldn't get much out of it.
I'm learning, so I could pick out certain stuff, but yeah, with Matsuno, he doesn't seem to really want to do AAA stuff. Sakaguchi kind of let the cat out the bag and said that he was working on a game. Not Sakaguchi, but that Matsuno is working on a game.
Got it.
So, Matsuno is working on some game, but we don't know what it is. And it's not Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah.
So, Matsuno's disciples, you could maybe call them, those are the ones who are working on Final Fantasy 16. But in terms of like what Matsuno's doing, it seems like he just doesn't have any interest in doing large scale games anymore. And who knows what it is that he's working on right now, but it's not anything that has currently been announced. So he could be involved with Tactics Remaster. He could be involved with Tactics Ogre, because there was Tactics Ogre Reborn that kind of leaked out.
Yep.
So we really don't know what he's involved in right now, but he's doing something with games, and that's cool.
All right. So, I didn't know that. That's good.
Do we have like a last big question, chat, that we can take? I'd like to thank all of you who did send in your question. What's a really
Indeed. Thank you very much.
I tried to do it a little different this time, where I actually screenshotted them while we go, so I didn't have to like
scroll back through.
Yeah, I didn't scroll back through. And then sometimes there's like a limit for how much you can scroll back through, and I'm like, fuck, I lost like some good questions like while I was going through. So if anyone else has any remaining questions, I'll give you an opportunity to ask those right now, so that we can do it. I'll say this. There's some discussion about real fast. I'll just say this isn't really an answer to a question, but people are talking about Tactics 2 or doing a true Evilise, doing a true Tactics follow-up. I think Tactics is unfollow-upable. Like, people complain about Advance being so different. I think it was so different because Tactics is unfollow-upable. There's no point in doing another game in that time period or with that tone, because it just like it won't be as good. I can feel that.
There's no point in doing a direct original Tactics style game. In my personal opinion.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think that this is actually a really good closeout question. This comes from Kingdom Trigger. What team? He has like, what team do you think is making FF17 right now? But I'd rather ask because I would rather ask, which team do you think is going to make FF17?
I don't know the teams well enough. Who's unaccounted for right now? Kind of refresh my memory.
That's the thing. Everyone's accounted for.
Okay.
Except for Yoko Taro. And he's working on Near Reincarnation, the mobile game. Obviously, he's still putting out content for that. But clearly, that's not the only thing that he's doing.
There's a real game in development over there.
Right. But I don't know if I want him working on Final Fantasy 17. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Yoko Taro fan. But I think he's had like a massive success with Nier. And I feel like Nier should probably be his focus. For now on. I mean, Nier Automata sold about as much as a Final Fantasy game. Yeah. So, I mean, that's huge.
Somebody points out in chat that he's doing the voice of card games right now as well. Like, he's like the creative directing or creative producing or something.
Right, but he's done with those, right? Like, yeah. I mean, he's done with those, right? Unless there's a third one coming out.
I don't know if there's a third one or not. They did two really quickly. I don't know if there's been a third one announced.
Yeah. I imagine, too, after the success of Automata and Replicant, that they really want a third Nier game.
Probably, yeah.
So
I mean, realistically, I think probably 17 isn't in production because, like you said, everybody's kind of accounted for right now. It's probably going to be it might be Creative Business Unit 3. That's the FF14 guys, right?
Yeah. 3? So yeah. I would imagine them like, okay, we finished 16. we're gonna go directly into 17 after that.
If they've expanded enough that they have enough people running 14, making content for 14, developing Endwalker, and another team over there building FF16, well, and when FF16 is done, that's too many people to realistically go, okay, now everybody go work on 14 again, probably.
Right.
So, like, I mean, I'd have to imagine they would have to start on another major game immediately afterwards. It's not like, oh, they took their one shot at a mainline FF other than an MMO, and then go back to doing MMOs, right? Assuming 16 sells well, which I have no reason to assume that it won't. You know, it's gonna be out before the 7 Remake project is done, so I wouldn't be stunned if they get 17. If they just get handed 17, because there's nobody else, there's no other team around with the scale and pedigree to do it. Because everybody else is, because Nomura and Toriyama are doing 7 Remake.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say it again. If this one is like Heavensward, I want the next one to be like Stormblood, aesthetically.
Yeah.
Because I just think, like, especially if they like leaned into like the feudal Japan aspect of it, like if they mixed like feudal Japan with Final Fantasy magic, and summons, I think that would be raw as hell. Like, I would be really into that. I think a lot of people would also be really into that too, especially if you have like a main character who's like a samurai.
Yeah, I said last time when you brought this up, I'd be there for that 100%.
Yeah, I think that would be really, really, really cool. Yeah, like Final Fantasy, basically like Final Fantasy X, Stormblood. I just really like that aesthetic and using those cultures. I also think that, because I know that obviously Forspoken is kind of like what Agni's philosophy, or evolved kind of out of Agni's philosophy. But I really do think that like they use some like really original cultural inspiration there that we haven't like really seen in the Final Fantasy space yet. And I think that it looked like it was potentially like Middle Eastern culture, like a lot of concepts from that culture. So I think it'd be really cool if they maybe not revisited it in the same way Agni's philosophy did, because that's Luminous Productions thing. But if they were to do something like that and to use maybe even another culture as inspiration, I think that would be cool.
Yeah,
that's kind of like what I would see most. I kind of want 17 to do something really bold with the setting, like really bold. And I don't want more medieval fantasy, nor do I want more modern stuff either. I want something that's like really bold. Like really not what we're used to seeing. So I don't want more 7 or 8, but I don't think I actually want to see more 12, 14 style stuff with 17 either. I want 17.
I don't think they would. Because especially if it was Business Unit 3 doing it, they will have now made 2 games like that. Yeah. Chat just said FF in space, which makes me think of W. The
Project W. I don't want space. I don't want space personally.
I didn't say you wanted it. I just said it would be different.
Yeah, it would be different, but I don't want space. I don't think like level of tech is necessarily like the thing that like I'm really looking for. It's more like culture and setting.
No, I totally get it. I agree. Stormblood inspired would be fun.
Yeah, I think inspiration from like something like Stormblood or 10, where they use like a lot of the Pacific Islands. I think that would be like a really cool place. For me, I would say like Asian, maybe Middle Eastern, high fantasy, like they did with Agni's philosophy. I think that would be cool, because I feel like, especially like, because I mean, again, like, note how everyone reacted to like how Agni's philosophy was, right? Where Agni's philosophy, is kind of like low tech and then some areas, right? And then when they flew off into the distance, you kind of saw like almost like a futuristic looking city in the background. So I had like this weird blend of tech and non-tech and magic and all these other things. And I feel like that's actually like, I mean, to me, that's what Final Fantasy is all about, like blends of those types of things. And I feel like something like that would be like the perfect setting for Final Fantasy 17. That's what I want. Something that feels.
I don't have a pitch for a 17 right now. So yeah, I'm just gonna say yes. I'd be down for that.
Tim Rogers' pitch is that it should be a pixel game.
Oh, I mean, I pitched that. That was my pitch like 10 years ago. It was like Final Fantasy 16. It should be Final Fantasy 16 bit. It should look like well, it shouldn't look like Chrono Trigger. It should look like what's that game? It's the guys who did The Messenger are making like Sea of Stars. You seen this game before?
I don't.
RPG Sea of Stars.
I feel like I have.
Chrono Trigger kind of looking.
Oh wait, yes, I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is
make
cool.
It have to look like that, right?
Yeah. So, and one of the things that Tim said is that like it should be directed by Sakaguchi, because Sakaguchi has been flirting with like wanting to do one last Final Fantasy.
If you wanted to, sure, yeah. I mean, obviously, I'd be fine with that.
I think it'd be so cool if Sakaguchi, like, if he did do like one last Final Fantasy before he just like retired. I'm done. Leave me alone. Let me play Final Fantasy 14. If he did one last thing, I think at the very least him directing like Final Fantasy 17 or 18, and it's gonna be like a throwback pixel game.
Yeah, I'd be down for that.
Yeah.
I'd be down for that.
I would be down for that. I think it'd be really cool. Honestly, even if he did something that wasn't necessarily like AAA, and it was just like very like low key, and it was just like, yeah, he's gonna do like this one last hoorah for FF.
Sure.
I'd be into it. All right, I think we're going to wrap the discussion up there today. Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything you want to plug, your channel, anything you're working on?
Well, first, thank you again for having me. Always fun. I guess I shouldn't say. I couldn't have said always until this time because it was only one time previously, but now it's been twice, so I can in fact say always fun. And it's statistically significant. I was gonna say, sorry. In terms of stuff to plug, we just wrapped up a playthrough of Uncharted 3 games deep into that over on my Let's Play channel. If you go find me on Frustrated Jacob on YouTube. You can find our Let's Play channel as well. It's called Research. We're currently playing through Breath of the Wild, streaming that. It's gonna be a while, but eventually, Uncharted 4 probably gonna start around August or so. And a mystery mystery Let's Play that I cannot announce yet, but all I will say is it will likely be something. I mean, I'd like to hopefully people have all kinds of different interests, but a game that I'm fairly confident folks here in your chat would be interested in seeing. But I will say no more than that right now.
Oh.
Working on some other stuff on the main channel right now that's going to be coming out soon. The last time around, you gave me a thing to plug, and I was, I don't know what to do. I did want to plug this time. A guy named Kryptonix02, I believe is his username, is doing a primo choice Kingdom Hearts rewrite series right now. Doing kind of his fan fiction, like it doesn't get pure fan fiction until later, but it's kind of starts out as a little rearranging and tweaking of the story in spots, and then now he's up to Dream Drop Distance, and it's kind of a totally different beast. But he released his Dream Drop Distance video 2 ago. If you're a Kingdom Hearts fan, and you want to watch a little like, hey, what could have been? It's a fun little series. Go check that out. It's just called like Rewriting Kingdom Hearts or something. I forget what it's called. Kryptonix02. You can probably find him relatively easily.
I actually saw some of that. It was really good. I saw some of it. I haven't kept up with the whole series, but I saw like the first part of it, and it's really good.
Let me double check I got the names right there.
Yeah, go ahead. It was really good when I was watching it, and he made like a lot of just simple tweaks to like the lore and how he would have approached it, and some of the potential that's lays within Kingdom Hearts if it was just written like a little bit cleaner than what it is.
Yeah, Kryptonix02, How to Fix Kingdom Hearts Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 are out so far.
Yeah, I know I've watched the first part. It was actually like I look for video essays when I'm at the gym, and a long time ago I put the first part on. I was like, this is really interesting. Guy trying to like, how he would approach writing Kingdom Hearts. Really, really, really good content. I was like, whoa. Maybe I shouldn't put this one on at the gym. This might be good to like watch in full.
That's all I got for today, though. I'm gonna be working on some stuff, and that's my one not me plug for the day.
All right, Jacob. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us, everybody in chat. We are going to let's raid Frankie. Let's raid Frankie Lolia. She's playing Nier Automata right now. I think she's doing Route C. I want to say that she said on Twitter. I want you guys to go give her all the same love and support that you've given us. And I'll be back tomorrow doing something. Some kind of bull. All right, later, guys.
See you guys next time. Thanks for having me.